During a family road trip across the Utah desert, my daughter suddenly handed me a camera before stepping out of the RV. "Dad, keep my camera for me for a while, okay?" I didn't think much of it at first, but later that night, while the desert wind shook the RV windows and everyone else was asleep, I realized something strange. The camera she gave me wasn't hers. It belonged to her husband. At first, I figured she'd picked up the wrong one by mistake. But when I opened it, what I found inside was a secret so dark it had no business existing at all. There are some fictional elements woven into this account to sharpen the message, but the truth underneath it, that's what matters. I want that part to stay with you. A call came in while I was holding a firearm. That wasn't unusual. What stopped me cold for the first time in 3 decades was whose name lit up the screen. Selena. I laid the 1895 Marlin barrel I'd been cleaning on the workbench and rubbed the gun oil from my hands with a cloth that smelled like bore cleaner and years of careful use. Around me, the shop was dead quiet. Nothing but the low drone of the ventilation system I'd rigged up on my own. Welcome back to Father's Silent Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me for this one. If these stories stay with you the way they stay with me, go ahead and subscribe and give this a like. It means more than, you know. And before we get into it, tell me in the comments, what's the weather like where you're sitting right now? There's something about listening to a story like this that feels different depending on the sky outside your window. Now, a quick note before we begin. Some elements of this story have been shaped and dramatized for audio storytelling. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is entirely coincidental. It's the meaning underneath that matters. Hackett Firearms Restoration held down a corner unit in an Albuquerque industrial district where nobody paid attention to the sound of metalwork at strange hours. 28 years out of Army reconnaissance, and my hands were steadier around gunmetal than they'd ever been around anything else. I picked up on the 4th ring. Dad. Her voice wasn't what I remembered, smoother, now more measured. "I know it's been a while. I want to fix that." 3 years since we'd managed a conversation longer than 2 minutes. 3 years of birthday calls that clocked out at 90 seconds, and holiday texts that said just enough to prove she hadn't forgotten I was alive. Selena Hackett was 43 now, left-handed and sharply organized in ways that made me uncomfortably aware of who I'd been at that age. She'd always run precise. "I'm listening," I said. "A road trip, just family. Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Texas. I'll cover everything. RV rental, fuel, hotels, meals. I've already started laying out the route. I want us to reconnect, Dad. Really reconnect. Trent and I both do." Trent. Her husband. 45 geological engineer specializing in underground surveying for mining operations. I'd been around him twice, once at their wedding 4 years back, once at a Christmas dinner where he'd contributed maybe 15 words to the whole evening. Quiet man. The kind of quiet that comes from thinking too hard, not from having nothing to say. "When do we leave?" I asked. She paused. Something drifted in from her end music maybe, or a television in another room. "Saturday morning. I've already mapped the route. We'll pick you up at 600. Saturday was 4 days out. She wanted to rebuild family bonds she'd spent 3 years letting go to rot. And she wanted to do it in 4 days, with a fully funded, fully plotted cross-state drive that apparently had detailed routing done before she'd even confirmed I'd say yes. I should have asked why. Should have pressed hard on it. Why now? Why this route? Why the sudden urgency after 3 years of deliberate distance? Instead, I said, "I'll be ready." She gave me the address where the RV rental place needed my signature, told me to pack light, told me she was looking forward to it. Her voice carried the kind of warmth that sounded nearly real. Nearly. When I set the phone down, the smell of gun solvent seemed to thicken in the air. I looked at the 1895 Marlin barrel I'd been cleaning on the workbench. A collector's piece serial number, worn almost smooth metal that had outlasted most marriages. 2 days sat between that call and dinner. 2 days to turn over the question of why my daughter had decided she wanted her father back. Wednesday evening, I was standing outside an apartment complex in a newer stretch of Albuquerque where everything looked identical and expensive. Selena pulled the door open before I could knock. "Dad." She hugged me, brief, efficient, smelling like cedar and something citrus I couldn't quite place. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The apartment was exactly what I'd anticipated. Clean, modern, dressed up with the sort of careful blankness that suggested nobody truly lived there so much as passed through between work obligations. Trent was at the dining table with both hands wrapped around a spoon, rotating it slowly. He glanced up when I came in, gave one nod, and looked back down. "Trent's been so stressed with work lately," Selena said from the kitchen, her left hand moving through a chopping rhythm with the knife. "Practiced, even. This trip will be good for all of us, won't it, honey?" "Yeah." Trent's voice barely registered. I pulled out a chair across from him. Up close, he looked worse than I remembered from Christmas, thinner, worn down in ways that 45 had no business producing. The spoon kept turning. His knuckles had gone white around it. "How's the surveying work going, Trent?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes met mine for under 2 seconds. 30 years of reconnaissance had trained me to read faces under pressure, to tell apart stress from fear, exhaustion from desperation, to know when a man is carrying more weight than he's built to hold. Trent's expression wasn't stress. It wasn't exhaustion. It was terror. A man who breaks eye contact that fast is either hiding something or shielding someone. "Fine," he said, voice dropping further. "Just fine." Selena brought plates to the table, chicken stew that smelled like rosemary and onion and broth simmered down low. She patched over the silence with upbeat energy running through the RV's features. The scenic pull-offs she'd mapped, the hiking trails out in the canyon country she had her eye on. Her words flowed smooth and unbroken, plugging every gap before it could open into something awkward. I ate, nodded, and watched Trent move food around his plate with hands that trembled just slightly. "We'll have so much time to catch up," Selena said, looking across the table at me with a smile. "Real quality time, no distractions, no work, just family." "Sounds good," I said. Trent's spoon rattled against the edge of his plate. He apologized, retrieved it, set it down with more care. When dinner wound down, Selena walked me to the door with a full rundown of Saturday's departure logistics. She hugged me again, same brief efficiency, and said she couldn't wait. I drove back through Albuquerque traffic with the taste of that stew still with me and Trent's terrified eyes etched into my mind. He'd held my gaze for under 2 seconds before dropping back to his plate, but I'd spent 30 years reading faces in high-stakes conditions. That wasn't the look of a man worn out from a hard week. That was the look of a man who'd witnessed something he couldn't unfeel or knew something he was too afraid to say out loud. Saturday would bring answers whether I was prepared for them or not. Saturday morning came in smelling like coffee and gasoline. I was in the rental lot at 5:45 watching Selena circle the RV with a printed checklist, ticking items off with the kind of precision I'd seen in mission briefings. Trent was on the rear bumper staring at the ground. The RV door sealed at 600 on the dot. Before we cleared the lot, Selena reached into the overhead compartment and pressed a camera case into my hands. "Here, Dad, take this. You should have something to photograph the landscape with." She smiled, quick and easy. "Almost forgot it. Again." She rolled her eyes at herself. "Don't let me be careless with it, all right. Keep it on you." I laughed and looped the worn leather strap over my shoulder. Leica M6 classic design, black body, silver trim, the kind of camera that belonged behind glass in a collector's display. I didn't think twice about it. Selena was already turning back toward the driver's seat, checking her printed route, moving on to the next item on her mental list. I settled the camera against my chest and watched Albuquerque fall away behind us, and with it, whatever chance I'd had of stepping back from what was coming. Selena took the wheel. I moved to the passenger seat, and Trent drifted to the rear without a word, dropping into the bench seat by the small dining table. The engine turned over, and Albuquerque began to shrink as the pre-dawn dark slowly gave way to the bruised purple of early sunrise. "I mapped every stop, Dad," Selena said, tapping a folder wedged between the seats. "Gas stations, rest areas, campgrounds. We'll make good time if we hold to the schedule." I opened the folder. Inside, printed maps, routes highlighted in yellow. Not one route, 3 separate highways with alternate paths marked in blue. Rest stops circled. Mileage figures written in the margins. Estimated arrival times at each checkpoint. "You put serious thought into this," I said. "I wanted everything perfect. Family time is precious." She said it like she meant it. Maybe she did. But 30 years in reconnaissance had shown me the gap between careful planning and operational precision. This wasn't a vacation itinerary. This was a mission plan. The Colorado desert spread out around us as sunrise dragged the sky from purple to orange to hard, flat blue. Sagebrush and dust ran to mountains that looked cut from cardboard on the horizon. The highway was empty, except for the occasional semi rolling past in the opposite lane, rocking the RV with a wall of displaced air. Trent hadn't spoken since we'd left. I glanced back once and caught him staring through the window at the land scrolling by, as though he was fixing it in his memory, or trying to block out where we were headed. "Trent, how you doing back there?" I asked. "Fine," he said, same barely audible voice from dinner. Selena covered the silence with bright running commentary, the scenery, the weather, the RV's fuel economy. Her voice stayed constant, controlled, never allowing quiet to settle for more than a few seconds. 3 people inside a 30-foot steel box rolling into open desert. I didn't know yet that only 2 of us would make the return trip in the same direction. We stopped for gas at 10:30, right on schedule with Selena's printed plan. Selena handled the fuel while I worked the kinks out of my legs, and Trent vanished into the restroom. It was one of those solitary outpost stations that only exists because the nearest town is 80 miles off. Heat bent the air above the blacktop. A sun-bleached billboard pushed a casino that had likely shuttered before I hung up my uniform. Selena checked her watch, the map, the fuel gauge. Everything measured, everything verified. "We're making perfect time," she said with a smile. Back on the highway, the world thinned out, fewer cars, fewer structures. Just desert and sky, and that unbroken black ribbon of road, splitting both. Around noon, Selena took an exit I hadn't spotted on any of her printed maps. "Rest stop?" I asked. "Just a short detour. Want to confirm a few things before we cross into Utah." The road went from asphalt to gravel to bare dirt. Dust billowed behind us as we rolled into a ghost town. Bleached timber frames, hollow windows, no signage, no other vehicles. "No cell signal," I noted, looking at my phone. Selena parked and stepped out. She moved to the rear storage compartment and began working through her bags with the same precise efficiency she'd applied to those printed route maps. Lifting cases, setting them aside, running inventory. I watched her in the side mirror. She went still, both hands flat on an open case, staring down at whatever wasn't inside it. That stillness held for maybe 3 seconds, long enough for me to know something had broken in her calculations. I turned. Something missing. She looked up. Her eyes moved from my face to the Leica hanging around my neck, one quick flicker there, and gone before the smile came back. "No, all good. I just thought I'd packed something extra." She shut the case. "Ready when you are." She'd been looking for the camera already hanging around my neck. I said nothing. I settled back into the passenger seat as she fired the engine and steered us toward the highway. But the image stayed, her hands going still over that empty case, that split-second glance at the Leica like she was recalculating something she hadn't accounted for. Something in her plan had shifted. I didn't know what. Not yet. The Leica sat against my chest, feeling heavier than it had any right to. Weight pulling slightly forward, as though something inside wasn't sitting right. 3 decades of weapon repair had schooled me in what uneven weight distribution meant. But I kept quiet. Not yet. I'd carry that weight for the next 6 days without fully understanding what it meant until I did. The camera hung from my neck for the next 8 hours as we crossed into Wyoming, and the wrongness of that weight never quit. The desert night was so still, I could hear the focus ring click when I turned it. Feel something shift inside that had no business shifting. Selena and Trent had turned in an hour earlier in the small sleeping compartment at the back of the RV. I sat alone beside a dying campfire at a Wyoming desert campground, where the only other occupants were 2 dark, silent trailers parked across the grounds. Above me, stars packed the sky in numbers you never saw in Albuquerque. No light pollution, no city glow, just the Milky Way thrown across the dark like spilled salt. I raised the Leica toward the constellations. The weight pulled forward on the strap, front heavy, in a way that felt intentional. I turned the focus ring slowly, tracking the mechanical clicks. Smooth, precise, exactly what you'd expect from German engineering, except for the resistance, a subtle drag in the mechanism that had no place in a properly maintained vintage camera. I lowered it and cradled it in both hands, testing the balance. A Leica M6 weighs 560 grams, I said quietly to the fire. This one feels like 700, maybe 750. My hands knew before my mind caught up. 3 decades of reassembling weapons in the dark had turned my fingers into instruments more dependable than any scale. This object had been modified. Something inside didn't belong. I turned the camera over. The serial number was there on the bottom plate, worn but legible. The leather showed the right age and use. The brass fittings carried the correct patina. Everything about it announced authenticity except the weight distribution. Weight doesn't settle like this unless someone added something the manufacturer never put there, I said. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the night. I glanced toward the RV. Dark windows. Good. 3 decades had taught me to trust my hands over my eyes. In reconnaissance, you worked in blackness, assembling and stripping equipment by feel alone. Your fingers learned to read metal the way other people read text. Every surface told you something. Every weight shift carried meaning. This camera was telling me the story. I just hadn't reached the ending yet. I rested the camera on my knee and watched the fire. Then I confirmed the RV windows were dark and went inside. The interior was black, except for pale moonlight filtering through the windshield. I moved quietly through the narrow channel to the small dinette table, sat down, and pulled the chain on the overhead lamp. Soft yellow light pooled across the surface. Behind me, the sleeping compartment door was still closed. No sound from Selena or Trent. I pulled my Gerber multi-tool I'd carried for 20 years, edges worn smooth from use, from my jeans pocket. The small screwdriver blade came out with a soft click. Removing a Leica lens demanded patience and a careful touch. Too much pressure, and you'd strip the mounting threads. I gripped the lens barrel gently and rotated counterclockwise, feeling the threads give. 3 turns, and it came free. What I found inside stopped my hands cold. The optics weren't standard Leica glass. Behind the front element sat an infrared assembly, compact, professional, military grade. The kind of specialized optics built for scanning subsurface structures, mapping tunnel networks, pushing through earth and concrete to render detailed thermal imagery. Not photography equipment. Reconnaissance equipment. I set the lens down carefully and examined the camera body. The mirror box looked correct at a glance, but the weight was still wrong. I turned it over, and I found what I'd been hunting. A seam along the bottom plate that had no reason to exist. Pressure from my thumbnail revealed a hidden compartment sealed with friction fit so exact you'd never catch it unless you knew to look. Inside was a chip the size of my fingernail secured with technical epoxy. Technical epoxy, the kind used on classified equipment at Fort Bragg, not on consumer cameras coming out of Tokyo. I'd encountered encryption chips before years back during classified briefings on intelligence hardware. This one carried the distinctive gold contact pattern of new generation military technology, the kind deployed for secure data transmission. Satellite uplink encryption, protected communications in hostile territory, and underground mapping. Military infrared optics, I said quietly. Underground tunnel scanning capability, encryption chip. I stared at it, working through the implications, the weight, the precision installation, the technical epoxy. This was not amateur work. This was professional-grade espionage hardware hidden inside a camera that looked exactly like something a collector would carry. The kind of camera a border agent would glance at and wave on without a second thought. Because who suspects a 60-year-old man carrying his son-in-law's vintage photography hobby? This isn't Trent's prized possession, I said. This is evidence of something federal. I thought about Selena's precise route. Planning the military-grade attention to every detail, the scheduled stops, the ghost town where she'd gone motionless over an empty case, eyes cutting to the camera around my neck like she was revising a calculation that hadn't accounted for me. My daughter's camera. My daughter's secret. Whether she'd intended for me to have it was beside the point. The treason was hanging around my neck either way. The sleeping compartment door stayed closed. No movement, no sound, just the faint hum of the RV's ventilation and my own steady breathing. I had maybe an hour before dawn, maybe less. I used the multi-tool's smallest blade to photograph the chip's serial number with my phone insurance if it came to that. Then I pressed the bottom plate carefully closed until the friction seal clicked back into position. The infrared optics went back inside the body. The lens threaded on smoothly 3 turns clockwise until it seated. I checked the weight distribution one final time and looped the strap around my neck. My reflection in the dark RV window showed nothing. 30 years of reconnaissance had given me that much. Whoever wanted me sleeping soundly tonight couldn't know I was wide awake. By morning, I'd need to decide: confront my daughter or let her go on believing the trap was still intact. I switched off the dinette light and sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of treason against my chest, and started working out my next move. By morning, my mind was made up. Let her think the trap was still running. A hunter who shows himself too early surrenders his edge. I counted 4 glances across 20 minutes, quick, nervous checks Selena thought I'd miss. Sunday morning sunlight cut through the RV windows. I sat at the table with oatmeal and black coffee, eating like the world hadn't shifted under me. Like I hadn't spent half the night taking apart espionage hardware piece by piece. Like I didn't know my own daughter had made me an unwitting courier for military-grade intelligence equipment. The Leica hung at my chest, heavy, obvious, impossible to overlook. Selena stood at the kitchenette counter pouring coffee with her left hand. She glanced at the camera, not checking that it was still there. Something else. The look of someone who'd spotted her own mistake and was still calculating the damage. Nearly invisible. Nearly. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said, setting 2 mugs on the table. "We'll make good time today. The route you mapped out is efficient," I said, watching her face. "You put real thought into it." Something moved behind her eyes. She smiled and settled into the seat across from me. I wanted everything to go right. Family time should be intentional. Intentional. Interesting word to reach for. Trent came out of the sleeping compartment looking like sleep had never found him. Red-rimmed eyes, hair a wreck. He poured coffee with hands unsteady enough to knock the cup against the pot. "How'd you sleep?" I asked. He didn't answer, just carried his mug to the table and sat without lifting his eyes. His hands wrapped around it, trembling. Selena glanced at the camera again. Second time, still trying to make it read as casual. I ate and said nothing. The silence thickened. Nobody remarked on the camera hanging in plain view around my neck. That quiet told me more than any question could. Selena cut a third look while clearing dishes, not confirmation assessment. She was working through options I hadn't mapped yet. Trent set his mug down with unsteady hands and fixed his gaze on the table, lips clamped shut like he was physically bracing against words trying to get out. One of the two people in this vehicle was afraid of what I was carrying. The other one just looked shattered. "We should get moving," Selena said, glancing at her watch. "I want to reach the Wyoming border by noon." Fourth look at the camera. 20 minutes, 4 checks. I stood and stretched. "Sounds good. I'll drive if you want." "No, that's okay. I know the route." Of course she did. We pulled out at 8:30. Selena drove while Trent retreated to the back bench, staring out at the Wyoming desert rolling past. I took the passenger seat and adjusted the side mirror. That's when I saw it. Black SUV, no front plate, tinted windows, holding steady about 400 mph back. I'd trained in surveillance techniques during Army reconnaissance. 400 mph was textbook, far enough to look innocent, close enough to hold visual contact on open highway. I said nothing, just watched the mirror. The SUV held position. Not 390, not 420. Exactly 400 mph speed, adjusting precisely whenever Selena accelerated or eased off. Professional. We crossed into Wyoming around noon. The landscape flattened and hardened. The highway stretched out straight for miles. The black SUV stayed 400 mph back. I needed to test it. "I need to use the restroom," I said. "Next gas station, okay?" Selena nodded. "There's one in about 20 miles. But I pointed to an exit sign coming up a small station not marked on her maps. "Actually, there's one right here. Let's stop now." I watched her hands tighten on the wheel just slightly. "We're making good time," she said. "The next one is nicer." "Yeah, this one's fine," I said. She took the exit. The station was small, worn down. Selena pulled up to the pump. I climbed out and headed for the restroom. In my peripheral vision, the black SUV turned off the highway and parked at the far edge of the lot. Not at the pumps, not near the store. Just watching. 400 mph precise. Professional surveillance distance, I said under my breath. I used the restroom and came back out. The SUV was still there, engine running. We pulled back onto the highway. I watched the mirror. The SUV waited 30 seconds, then eased out and settled back into position 400 mph behind. For the next day and a half, I put them through it. Varied my speed, deliberately dropping to 55, pushing to 75. The SUV tracked every change without missing a beat, holding that exact gap. When we stopped for the night, it parked at a rest area half a mile back. When we got rolling the next morning, it was back within 10 minutes. "They adjust every time I change speed," I said under my breath. "They know precisely what they're tracking." This wasn't Selena keeping tabs on me. This was external surveillance, disciplined patient equipped with tracking technology, following something inside this RV. Following the chip. Not Selena's people monitoring me. Someone else tracking the chip. Who was in that vehicle? Selena's handler. A competitor angling to take the chip, or federal agents already inside the operation. The pieces were locking in, but I still didn't know which game was being played. Selena had put espionage equipment in my hands. Someone else was tracking it. And Trent looked like a man caught between forces he had no way to manage. 3 layers of deception at minimum, maybe more. I held a steady speed and watched the SUV maintain position in my mirror. 400 mph. Not 395, not 410. Professional surveillance demands training and discipline. Whoever sat in that vehicle had no idea I'd burned them. That miscalculation would cost them when the time came. But first I needed to know whose side they were on. Answering that meant reaching someone who would actually know. I had one contact left from my army days capable of telling me. The restroom door lock clicked behind me, and I pulled out the burner phone I'd picked up 3 gas stations back. The Moab gas station restroom smelled like industrial cleaner and stale air freshener. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in harsh white. I stood with my back to the door and dialed a number I'd memorized 28 years ago and never once used. It rang twice. Vernon Hackett. The voice on the other end belonged to Arlo Pittman, 50 years old, Department of Homeland Security Special Agent, former Army Intelligence. He answered with the measured calm of someone who had worked through worse than this. "Sir, didn't expect your voice on this line. What do you have?" "Military infrared optics, encryption, chin chip, fingernail-sized technical epoxy seal. My daughter handed it to me 3 days ago." Silence on the line. Not hesitation processing. And the description matches classified hardware. Border tunnel mapping technology. "Where are you?" "Wyoming, heading toward Texas." "Who else knows?" "Nobody. She thinks I'm her unwitting courier." Another pause longer. I heard typing in the background, rapid keystrokes. "USC Section 794, Arlo said. "Treason. Gathering or delivering defense information to aid a foreign government. 40 years federal minimum, no parole before 25. Your daughter is looking at spending the rest of her productive life inside." The fluorescent lights hummed. "Someone tried the door handle, found it locked, moved on." "She doesn't know you made it?" Arlo asked. "She thinks I'm sleeping soundly." "Good. Keep it that way. Don't let her know you know. Don't confront her yet. We need to coordinate this properly. Multiple agencies, jurisdiction issues, potential international players. You carrying that chip makes you a federal asset and witness, not a suspect, but only if we control the narrative from here. Then what do you need from me?" "Moab tomorrow morning, 9:00 a.m., Callaway Watch Repair on 4th Avenue. Walk in and ask for a vintage Rolex repair estimate. They'll know what it means." "Who are they?" "People I trust. They'll get you what you need. After that, your job is straightforward. Keep wearing that camera, keep playing your role, and lead her exactly where we tell you to lead her." "And the black SUV that's been on us for 2 days. Hostiles." Arlo went quiet. The typing stopped. "Description," he said. "Black SUV, no plates, tinted windows, professional surveillance, 400M textbook distance maintenance." "That's not ours. Could be your handler checking the asset, could be competitors looking to intercept. Either way, they just became part of the operation. Don't lose them." "Understood." "Vernon, your daughter chose this. What happens next isn't on you." I looked at my reflection in that bathroom mirror. 68 years old, gray hair, a face carved by 3 decades of sun and silence. "I know," I said. The line went dead. I flushed the toilet for cover, washed my hands, and walked back to the RV. Selena was inside reorganizing the food storage. Trent sat outside on the bumper watching the darkening desert sky. Nobody asked what took so long. I had everything I needed now. All that was left was waiting for the right moment. Monday morning arrived with Wyoming heat and a sky scraped clean. We'd spent the night at a campground outside Moab, and Selena announced over breakfast that she wanted to make a stop in town for supplies before we pushed east. "There's a grocery store on 4th Avenue, she said, checking her map. "Should only take 20 minutes. 4th Avenue, right where I needed to be." "That works," I said. "I'll walk around while you're inside." Moab baked under a relentless sun, flat-roofed buildings fanned out beneath mountains that boxed in the valley on every side. Selena pulled up near the grocery store, and I covered 2 blocks on foot while she disappeared through the entrance. Callaway Watch Repair was wedged into a thin storefront, a used bookshop on one side, a tax preparer on the other. The window held a row of vintage pieces laid out on velvet Rolex Omega Patek Philippe. A small bell announced me when I pushed through the door. The shop smelled like gun solvent and aged wood. An elderly watchmaker sat behind the counter, a headband loop strapped across his forehead, working on a disassembled wristwatch movement. He glanced up as I stepped in, and something behind his eyes told me Arlo had already made contact. "I'm here for a vintage Rolex repair estimate," I said. "Ah, yes." He put his tools down without a beat of hesitation. "Give me just a moment." He went through a door at the back and came out 30 seconds later carrying a small parcel in brown paper. Nothing on the outside, but a strip of clear tape holding the fold shut. He set it on the glass and turned straight back to his work. No further words. I took the package light maybe 4 Oz, tucked it into my jacket, and stepped out onto the street. Half a block over, in a narrow alley behind a restaurant that had been shuttered a while, I tore it open. A thumb-sized black cylinder lay inside, perfectly smooth, one button at the tip. EMP generator. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. Electromagnetic pulse compact range, the type engineered to knock out electronics within 50 mph and leave everything biological completely alone. Resting next to it was a chip that could have come straight out of the Leica, matched it in every detail, dimensions, color, the gold contact array. Identical to look at. But this one was dead. A decoy built for the kind of cursory glance someone takes when they think they're confirming, not examining. There was also a handwritten note on flash paper that would burn in seconds. "Swap the chip. Draw them to open coordinates. We're here. W. Arlo." I pressed the EMP unit into my breast pocket directly over my sternum. I held the lighter to the corner of the note and watched it vanish in a clean white flare. No ash, no residue. The decoy chip slid behind my driver's license in my wallet, reachable fast when the moment came. The EMP rode in my jet, the weight almost nothing, but my awareness of it constant. Back at the lot, Selena was posted against the RV door, phone in hand, standing in the Wyoming sun. She raised her eyes when I came around the corner, and her face opened into a smile, unhurried, warm, the kind I'd watched her produce 10,000 times since she was 3. I returned it and got into the passenger seat. She was assembling something. She just didn't know I was doing the same. But here was the thing: Selena had her own trap in motion. I had no idea yet which of ours would close first. The canyon walls climbed 200 mums straight up on both sides, and when I checked my phone, there was nothing, 0 bars, exactly what Selena would have counted on. We'd been rolling east through Wyoming when she floated the detour. Red rock formations off Highway 60, she said. Stunning light at this hour, ideal for shooting with the Leica. Wouldn't it be nice to get some family photos with the Leica? I said yes, and let her pick the spot. The RV wound up a tight access road threading between massive red formations. Where it leveled out, the canyon spread around us, striated sandstone rising on both flanks, a natural chute, maybe 100 mph across. No other vehicles anywhere. No cameras mounted on anything. The road ran out at a small turnaround circle. Selena shut off the engine. The quiet was total. I pulled out my phone, 0 bars. No way to reach no way to document anything that came next apart from whatever federal hardware I was carrying in my jacket. "Dad, let's stop here," Selena said, already smiling. "La. The light's perfect. Look at these formations." I stepped out. Dry heat, the smell of stone that had been absorbing sun all day, wind threading through the slot overhead. "No reception out here," I said, phone raised. "That's the whole point. No distractions, just the family and all this." Trent came down out of the RV and drifted 20 mph toward the cliff's rim. He stood there with both hands buried in his pockets, shoulders rolled forward, eyes fixed on the valley floor far below. He wasn't looking at the camera. He wasn't looking at anyone. That was the posture of someone who understood what was coming and had already stopped fighting it. I did a slow turn, reading the ground. Cliffs 200 mph high on either side, one road in and out, no outside eyes, no signal, no record. This was not a photo stop. Selena had selected this location the way a military planner picks an engagement zone contained isolated the target with nowhere to go. The only open question was which of us was the target, me or Trent. Selena moved toward the far edge of the turnaround and stood looking out across the canyon. Her left hand moved slowly along the rim of rock. "Out here it's just quiet," she said. "Nothing but space." She hadn't driven us into a dead-end canyon to say that. She needed the absence of witnesses. I decided not to wait. "Selena," I said, "tell me what's actually in this camera." She turned. Her face went flat for one full second. Then her eyes filled and the tears came down. Controlled, precise. The performance was seamless. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Her voice fractured on the last word. I didn't know how to say it. I kept thinking you'd never forgive me for pulling you into this. She took a few steps toward me with her hands drawn together. The crying didn't stop. "So, giving it to you wasn't the plan," she said. The break in her voice sounded structural, not performed. "Saturday morning at the lot, I picked up the wrong case. By the time I understood what I'd done, we were already moving, and it was hanging around your neck. And her hand went over her mouth. I froze. There was no way to get it back without telling you everything. So you left it where it was," I said. More tears, a nod. "You're a veteran. At any checkpoint, they'd clear you on sight without searching your gear. I kept telling myself a few more days I'd work something out and have it back from you before we reached Texas." Her eyes drifted to Trent, standing at the rim. "He doesn't know I put anything in his camera. None of this. He thought it was sitting at my parents' place. I told him he'd left it there." She let out a long, slow breath. One bad decision, then more decisions to keep the first one from showing. I looked at her face. The tears were genuine. The account was constructed. 30 years of work had taught me that the two things have no relationship to each other. Someone can cry real tears for a lie they're invested in telling. Selena was frightened, but the thing she was frightened of was that I wasn't buying it. I looked at her face again, then across at Trent, motionless at the cliff edge, then down at the camera against my chest. "I hear you," I said, my voice hitting exactly the register of a father absorbing something he hadn't wanted to know. Selena's shoulders came down, her whole frame released. She put her hand over mine and held it. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for not. I just needed to get this out before we went any further." She had no idea I'd already tallied 5 separate lies in the past 3 minutes. She said the wrong case accident. But the ghost town pull-off appeared on no map she'd ever put in front of me. She said she froze and couldn't retrieve it, but she'd made 3 calls confirming coordinates confirmed before we'd cleared Texas. She said Trent had no knowledge that his camera had been altered. But a man doesn't spend 40 minutes crying at 2:00 a.m. over something he knows nothing about. She said she meant to have it back before Texas, but her routing had been locked in weeks before my phone ever rang, and she kept calling it a mistake. No part of this operation was a mistake. 5 lies on the floor minimum. But I needed something concrete before I let her see that I knew. The evidence surfaced sooner than I'd anticipated. I simply needed to look at the right thing. The scratches on the battery cover told me what Selena's tears had been working to conceal. After her canyon performance, we'd loaded back into the RV. She volunteered to drive, said I probably needed time after everything she'd just told me. I took the passenger seat and let her read that as the act landing. Trent got into the back and put himself against the wall without a word, while Selena pushed east through the Wyoming heat. I held the Leica in my lap and rotated it slowly in the afternoon light coming off the windshield. I wasn't admiring it. I was working it the same way I'd worked over weapons for 3 decades, hunting not for what the object was designed to be, but for what someone's hands had done to it since. The edge of the battery cover had marks on it. Shallow scratches easy to miss the signature of a flathead, or a blade tip forcing its way under a factory-sealed panel. I'd seen marks like these before on modified equipment. Hasty installations, field modifications, anything done under time pressure by someone who knew what they were doing but had to work fast. I held the camera up to the window light and studied the angle. Left to right. The deepest gouges originated on the left side of the cover and dragged rightward. The primary pressure point where the tool had levered hardest against the metal was positioned for a left thumb applying force, while right fingers held the body steady. Left to right. Left thumb primary pressure. I said it quietly, too soft for Selena to catch over the road noise. Trent was right-handed. I'd been watching him for days, coffee cup in his right hand, signing the RV rental paperwork with his right hand, opening car doors, turning pages, everything done right-handed, the way most people move through the world. But Selena had been left-handed since she was small. She colored with her left hand. 7 years old at my kitchen table, with a box of crayons. I could picture it clearly, Selena at age 7, tongue poking out in concentration, gripping a blue crayon in her left hand, while her right kept the coloring book from sliding. Her mother had fretted over it, wondered whether they ought to try to correct it. I told her to leave the kid alone. Left-handed people leave left-handed marks. It's forensic fact. The angle of tool pressure, the direction of scratches, the way force spreads across a surface, so all of it tells a story about which hand held the tool. These marks told me Selena had opened this camera, not Trent. Selena. She'd planted the chip herself, concealed the military hardware, built the entire elaborate setup, then handed it to me with a story that laid all the blame on her husband. I set the camera carefully on my lap and looked out the windshield at the empty Wyoming highway. I understand. I said it aloud, voice calm and level. In the driver's seat, Selena glanced over and smiled, relief visible in the way her shoulders dropped, tension bleeding out of her. She thought I meant I understood her difficult position, her moral dilemma, her need for a father's guidance. I meant I understood she was lying. And now I had proof, her first irreversible mistake. We got back in the RV. Selena put her feet up and hummed to herself. I drove and I began very quickly to plan. We stopped for the night at a rest area outside Flagstaff. Selena made dinner rice and beans from a can, tortillas from the campground store. We ate in near silence. Trent pushed food around his plate without touching it. Selena talked about tomorrow's route, the beautiful New Mexico landscape ahead. How good it was to finally have some family time together. I nodded and said the right things and watched Trent's hands tremble. By 10:00 p.m., everyone had retreated to their sleeping compartments. The RV had upper and lower berths. Selena took the rear compartment with the real bed. I took the upper fold-down berth above the driver's area. Trent got the converted dining table in the middle that dropped down into a narrow sleeping platform. I lay in the dark, listening to the RV settle and creak as the temperature fell outside. Selena's breathing from the rear compartment steadied into sleep within 20 minutes. She slept like someone with a clear conscience or good training. Below me, Trent's breathing stayed uneven. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard it begin. Heavy, ragged breathing, someone fighting hard and failing to hold back. Muffled sounds of a man coming apart under unbearable pressure, trying desperately to stay quiet, failing. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing myself. The sounds weren't loud. Trent was doing everything he could to muffle them, face probably buried in a pillow, hand pressed over his mouth. But sound carries in small spaces. The quiet, desperate despair of a man who knows terrible things are coming and cannot stop them. That's not guilt, I thought. That's fear. I'd heard guilty men cry before in interrogation rooms in prison, visiting areas in courtrooms when sentences came down. Guilty crying sounds different. It's self-pity, regret over consequences, grief at what's been lost. This was something else entirely. A man who cries like that at 200 a.m. isn't hiding a crime. He's hiding terror. Trent wasn't crying because he'd stolen classified intelligence and gotten caught. He was crying because someone had pulled him into a nightmare and he couldn't find any way out. The kind of crying that follows weeks or months of relentless pressure when every last bit of resistance has been worn away and compliance is the only option remaining. She's using him, and he knows what happens if he resists. Blackmail takes many forms: money, reputation, safety, family, whatever lever works to control the target. Selena had found Trent's lever and pulled it hard enough to break him. That wasn't the sound of a guilty man. That was the sound of a broken one. The crying went on for maybe 40 minutes, slowly fading into exhausted breathing, hitching gasps that gradually smoothed out. By 300 a.m., silence, then the deep, heavy breathing of someone who'd finally dropped into sleep from sheer exhaustion. I lay in the darkness above him, staring at the RV ceiling I couldn't see. By morning, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. Trent Dillard hadn't chosen this. Selena had trapped him in it, and I was going to get him out. But first, I needed him to know he wasn't alone anymore. Signaling Trent meant making Selena believe I was entirely on her side. Sometimes the most effective way to send a message is to say the exact opposite of what you mean. I put my hand on Trent's shoulder in full view of Selena and spoke the words she needed to hear. Tuesday morning at the rest stop, sunlight already punishing on the asphalt by 9:30. We'd pulled off Interstate 40 for gas and breakfast. Trent stood near the RV looking hollowed out like sleep had stopped being an option altogether. Selena was inside the convenience store getting coffee. I walked over to him slowly, making sure my body language read as a sympathetic father trying to close a difficult gap. Put my hand on his shoulder, the way you do with someone you're trying to hold up. I'm not judging you, son. Loud enough that Selena would hear through the open RV door when she came back. Shh. Everyone has their own difficult circumstances. Family sticks together. Trent's eyes shifted, confusion maybe, or the first flicker of hope that someone had finally seen through the lies. But he stayed silent. Jaw clenched, hands shoved into his pockets. Selena came out of the store with 3 coffees balanced in a cardboard carrier. Her face opened up when she caught what I'd said. "Thank you for understanding, Dad." Genuine relief in her voice. "It means everything to us." She set the coffees down and hugged me. Quick, tight, grateful. The hug of someone whose manipulation had just paid off beyond what she'd expected. I hugged her back and thought about federal prison sentences for treason. "I need to use the restroom," Selena said. "Be right back." She headed toward the rest stop building. I watched her go, counting seconds. Minimum 3 minutes for a restroom visit. The moment she disappeared inside, I moved. The recording device was in my jacket pocket, a thumb-sized cylinder that Arlo's contact had included with the EMP and the fake chip. Voice-activated 7-day battery adhesive backing strong enough to hold through vibration and temperature swings. I climbed into the RV and dropped to one knee beside the dining table. Found the sweet spot on the underside near the center support brace invisible unless you were specifically hunting for it. Peeled the adhesive backing and pressed it firmly into place. Held it for 5 seconds while the adhesive set. Tested the bond with a light tug, solid. Pressed the activation button once. A tiny green LED flashed twice, then went dark. Active. The recorder was running. From that moment forward, every word spoken at that table was evidence. I stood up, brushed off my knee, and was leaning against the RV exterior drinking coffee when Selena emerged from the restroom 2.5 minutes later. "Ready to go?" she asked. Ready. The recorder was smaller than my thumb. The evidence it would collect could send my daughter to prison for decades. We drove east through Wyoming. The landscape shifted from red rock to high desert scrub elevation, climbing as we drew closer to New Mexico. Selena drove and talked about family memories, the times she'd learned to fish with me, how much she appreciated having me along on this trip. Every word was being recorded, now building her own case against herself. Around 2:00 p.m., we stopped at a deserted gas station outside Holbrook. 2 pumps, a shuttered convenience store with boards over the windows. Nothing else for miles in any direction. "I'll pump," I said. "You and Trent stretch your legs." Selena nodded and drifted toward a picnic table in the shade. Trent followed her silent as always. I pumped gas and kept them in my peripheral vision. When they were both looking away, I pulled out the burner phone and checked for messages. One encrypted file from Arlo Large, maybe 20 megabytes. I downloaded it over the gas station's weak Wi-Fi signal, watching the progress bar inch across the screen. When it finished, I walked to the restroom on the far side of the building, locked the door, and opened the file. The maps were color-coded zones layered one over another. Red marked where military radar swept. Blue flagged the checkpoints. Green traced the corridor Selena had laid out. And that green line found 7 separate gaps in the red, threading through each one like whoever drew it had memorized the coverage grids from the inside. 12 federal border checkpoints scattered along the possible approaches, and the route sidestepped all of them. Arlo's note came attached. Route analysis complete. 7 radar blind spots, 12 checkpoints avoided. This is professional-grade operational planning. Planner has DoD security knowledge, either former government or connected to a current insider. I kept my eyes on the screen. Selena hadn't built this herself. Whoever laid this route out held a clearance, or had held one recently enough that none of the details had gone stale. This wasn't a daughter lifting classified files and improvising on the fly. What I was looking at was a conspiracy, one that required someone with hands-on familiarity with Defense Department security infrastructure, active or former. Someone who could tell you precisely where the radar went blind, and when each checkpoint rotated its shift, which roads would trip a flag, and which ones nobody watched. The kind of knowledge you don't find, you earn it over years inside the system. 7 blind spots, 12 checkpoints. This route had been built by someone who knew every seam in America's border security and stitched a path straight through them. I scrubbed the file and wiped the phone's cache, flushed the toilet so the sound was there if anyone was listening, washed my hands and walked out. Selena and Trent were already back at the RV. She gave me a smile and settled into the driver's seat. "How much further today?" I asked. "Maybe 3 more hours. There's a nice campground outside Albuquerque. We can stop there for the night." "That sounds good." Crossing the parking lot back to the RV, I pulled Arlo's message and wiped it clean. Selena stood against the door in the afternoon light, eyes down on her phone, no idea that federal analysts had just methodically disassembled everything she'd engineered. She glanced up, waved me over with that easy impatience she'd had since she was 8 years old. The same wave from the swing set when she wanted me pushing again. I lifted my hand in return and ran the count in my head, how many moving pieces now occupied a board she couldn't see. The board was in motion. My pieces needed to move before she noticed anything had shifted. The genuine chip was barely the size of my thumbnail. Lying in the dark of the RV, it was indistinguishable from the decoy DHS had handed me. But they were not the same thing. One protected the people my daughter had targeted, and the other would bring her down. Past midnight Wednesday, bleeding into morning, I was flat on my upper berth, with the sound of 2 people breathing in the compartments below. Selena's breath slow, measured deep under. Trent's shallower, fitful, but finally gone quiet. I held still another 30 minutes before I got up. The Leica was on its hook near the driver's seat. I took it down easy, snapped the pen light on low. 3 rotations, and the lens separated. The military infrared optics sat undisturbed inside. I wasn't touching those. The weight difference would register. The bottom plate came away, and there was the compartment. The real chip was fixed in place with technical epoxy I'd worked loose earlier in the day. Pocket knife slow pressure, and it came free. Fingernail-sized gold contacts catching the pen light. Top secret tunnel, mapping intelligence. And sitting in my wallet, the federal honeypot identical to look at built to tag everyone downstream who handled it. I swapped them, fake chip-seated adhesive drop compartment closed. The lens went back on. Weight check, nothing off. No way to tell by feel or sight that anything had changed. The genuine chip went into a padded envelope. Pentagon facilities, address Arlo's authentication codes. Next town, I'd get it in the mail. But before any of that, the EMP. Cold desert air when I dropped out of the RV door. Overhead, the stars were out solid, no moon anywhere. I went flat under the chassis with the pen light. The device fit in my palm, black, magnetic, thumb-sized. I mounted it on the engine block beside the battery terminal and ran the wire. 1 radio pulse from Arlo's team and everything electronic within 50 meters would go dead. I confirmed the connection, rolled out, knocked the dust off, and went back inside. Burner phone encrypted message outbound to Arlo, package secured. Coordinates 31.6891 DE north, 106.633 DE west of El Paso. Single access point, open ground. 30 seconds. Coordinates confirmed. Border Patrol coordinating. Draw them there. We'll be waiting. Both messages gone, phone off. Leica back on its hook. I climbed up to my berth, eyes shut. Tonight was the last night I'd lie here without knowing how it ended. Wednesday morning, Selena was in a different mood than any I'd seen on this trip, bright light, almost buoyant. She made French toast, humming while she cooked. Trent sat at the table with his hands around a cup of coffee he wasn't touching. El Paso today, Selena announced. We're making such good time, Dad. Isn't this trip wonderful? It's been educational, I said. She took that as a compliment. We rolled east out of New Mexico, crossed into Texas. The terrain shed its elevation and went spare and hard. Ahead on the horizon, the Franklin Range materialized, telling me El Paso was close. Around noon, her phone rang. She took the call, listened without speaking, then turned her face toward the windshield. Tomorrow morning, she said, her voice low. Yes, he's still wearing it. Everything's on schedule. She ended the call. 2 minutes, then another. Understood. Same location. Coordinates confirmed. Over the next 2 hours, 3 more calls followed. Each time she'd check the rear view to confirm I was looking elsewhere, then drop into quiet discussion, timing, specific locations, payment terms, getting the final details locked. Come tomorrow morning near El Paso. She'd make the handoff, what she believed was live classified intelligence exchanged for money. What she'd actually be handing over was a federal tracking device that would burn her entire network. I checked behind us. The black SUV had vanished. Not fallen back, gone entirely. 4 hours on the road and nothing. Not at rest stops, not in the mirror at distance. Just absent. They weren't gone because we'd shaken them. They were gone because they'd already reached the destination. No point shadowing us when they knew the finish line, and had gone on ahead to set the table position. The people established the security cordon stage for the exchange. Selena's mood suddenly made complete sense. This was her endgame arriving. The whole long operation folding into its final move. Use a decorated veteran as an unknowing mule, ferry the chip through hand it to the buyers. Take the money and let Trent carry whatever came after. Nearly airtight. I found Trent in the rear view. He was looking straight at me, not glancing, not flinching away. Fixed. His eyes said it plainly. Whatever his voice couldn't carry, his expression delivered in full. This is it. One way or another, this is where it closes. He understood something was going to break open tomorrow morning. He understood he was locked inside a mechanism with no lever he could reach, and he had no way of knowing I was working to get him clear. The highway sign came up on the right, El Paso, 50 miles. Selena caught it, and her expression brightened. "Almost there," she said. "We'll find a nice place to stay tonight. Get some rest before tomorrow." Before tomorrow, when she expected to collect millions and walk clean. I let the sign pass, then hit the rear view one last time. 2 hours since the SUV had been anywhere in that mirror. They didn't need to be behind us anymore. They knew our heading, our ETA, and they knew exactly what Selena believed was about to happen when the morning came. What they didn't know was what that recording device beneath the dining table had been quietly accumulating since Tuesday morning. It was waiting for me, hours of audio locked in digital storage, ready to finish the job of breaking what was left of my heart. Her voice came through the earbuds, cold and clear, and for 3 seconds I couldn't connect that sound to the child I'd spent a lifetime raising. Wednesday evening rest stop just outside El Paso. Sunset was spreading orange and purple across the desert sky. Selena had said she wanted a proper shower before the following day, picked up her toiletry bag, and crossed to the rest stop building. "I'll be 20 minutes, she'd said, easy smile in place. "Maybe longer. I want to feel human again." Trent hadn't moved from a picnic table outside, sitting with his gaze at nothing. The second she went through that door, I was already moving. I pulled the recording device from beneath the dining table, gentle tug, and it came loose. 7 days on battery, and it was still warm in my hand. LED steady. I ran the adapter cable Arlo's contact had provided and plugged it to my phone. Earbuds in. Playback from 24 hours back. Road vibration static, the texture of footsteps on the RV floor, ambient noise filling the feed. Then her voice cut through it. Late night, September 24th. I'd been asleep up in the berth. She must have been certain everyone was out when she picked up the phone. "The old man is holding the device." Selena's voice, quiet but sharp enough to carry. "Let him walk into the quarry confrontation. When both sides start shooting, I'll move on the chip and get out." A pause. Someone talking on the other end, too quiet for me to catch. "No, he won't suspect a thing. He believes I'm looking out for the family. Just pin everything on Trent afterward. His name is on the geological surveys. His signature, his employment records are what's on file. Every piece of paper points straight at him." Another pause. "Wire the 40 million to the account the moment verification clears. I'll be across the border inside 6 hours." My hands had started shaking. I stopped the playback and sat motionless in the empty RV eyes on the phone screen. That voice, I was the one who taught it to say goodnight, to say I love you, to say thank you, and please, and I'm sorry. And now it was telling someone to let her father die. I hit play. "The old man won't be a problem." Selena went on steady. "He's 68. Whatever reconnaissance training he picked up 3 decades back won't matter when professional operators open fire. And if he somehow survives the initial exchange, he'll spend every second trying to protect Trent rather than coming after me." The person on the other end said something. "Trent is completely broken. He'll do exactly what I tell him. Stand where I put him. I've made sure he understands the consequences of stepping out of line." Another pause. "My father, he was useful. Moved us through checkpoints, gave us cover. Decorated veteran playing the worried dad. But his usefulness runs out tomorrow. Clean break. No one left who knows the full picture, except Trent, and Trent's the one taking the fall." I sat there in the empty RV with her voice still sitting in my ears, and something I hadn't felt in 3 decades of combat settled into my chest. The absolute certainty that someone I loved was arranging for me to die. The recording rolled on into logistics. Meeting set for 10:00 a.m. She gave coordinates that matched the quarry I'd passed to Arlo exactly. Attendees, the buyer's team of armed contractors, Selena me as the unknowing mule, Trent as the designated fall guy. The plan was brutal in how cleanly it worked. Put me between two hostile forces, let the gunfire sort itself out, lift the chip in the confusion, disappear while I bled into the dirt, hang it all on Trent, and walk away with $40 million. She'd accounted for everything except the one variable she couldn't afford, that I wasn't anywhere near as blind as her plan required. I moved through more of the recordings at speed. Breakfast conversations where she performed the role of a daughter who cared, phone calls where she locked down timing with her buyers, moments where she'd reminded Trent what silence cost him. Every word was evidence. Every sentence another count in the federal case. $40 million is the same figure I'd accumulated across 28 years with the intention of leaving it to her. She'd elected to collect early. I pulled the earbuds out. My hands were trembling despite everything those 30 years of discipline had built in me. 30 years of training myself to stay steady when it mattered. And her voice had undone that in under 10 minutes. I saved the audio to my encrypted phone, compressed it, and attached it to a message going out to Arlo. Evidence attached. Daughter is planning my death at tomorrow's quarry meeting. Proceeding as planned. The file moved to Arlo's secure server and announced itself with a soft ping. 3 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. Evidence received. Audio is admissible. Federal prosecutor standing by. Tomorrow at the quarry we end this. I cleared the message and turned to look out the RV window. Selena was coming back from the rest stop, hair damp from the shower, fresh clothes, walking like someone with good reason to feel settled about the next morning. She had no idea her own words had just closed around her. She stepped up into the RV, smiling. "Feels so much better," she said. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect, Dad. I can feel it." "I'm sure it'll be memorable," I said. She squeezed my shoulder and went to the back to get herself sorted for the morning. I stayed at the dining table, the same table I'd used to plant the recorder, looking at the phone in my hands. The device now holding audio evidence of my daughter planning my murder. Evidence that would put her in federal prison for decades. That voice, I'd coaxed its first words out of her. Taught it my name. Heard it say "I love you" more times than I could count. Tomorrow I'd hand it to federal agents as proof of treason. She'd find out in the morning what it costs to miscalculate a reconnaissance officer who spent 6 days learning how to appear dead. Thursday arrived with a Texas sunrise, and I carried into it the absolute certainty that someone I loved had spent the night working through the details of how I would die. The "Welcome to Texas" sign went by on our right at 9:47 a.m. Behind us in the mirror, the black SUV had narrowed its gap to 100 meters, not trailing us anymore. Escorting. This was the day Selena had been building toward for months, maybe longer. The day that was supposed to end with $40 million offshore, and her father face down in desert dirt. Something had changed inside the RV overnight, and I could feel it. Selena rode in the passenger seat, running her thumbs across her phone with clipped precision. Every now and then, a private smile. Once, a quiet laugh. "Almost there," she said into the phone, keeping her voice low, but not low enough. "Yes, everything's perfect. He has no idea." She cut her eyes at me to measure how much I'd caught. I kept my gaze ahead, hands where they belonged on the wheel. Nothing on my face but the mild concentration of someone focused on the road. In the mirror, Trent hadn't moved. Eyes shut, but not sleeping. His face carried the look of a man who'd run out of ways to fight it, and had simply settled in to wait. Someone who'd already made his peace. Trent's eyes were closed. He'd already made his peace with whatever was coming. The black SUV kept tightening, 100 meters down to 70, then 50. No effort to stay invisible now. They wanted me seeing them. Wanted me feeling the push. Professional surveillance doesn't work that way. Professionals don't close the gap. But this wasn't a mistake or nerves. This was a deliberate signal. They were done concealing the operation. The net was drawn tight enough that letting me see it didn't change anything. I held exactly the speed limit. No reaction. No sign I'd clocked what had shifted. El Paso materialized ahead, low buildings fanning out across the Basin Mountains stacked behind. The road signs started ticking down the distance. El Paso 47 miles. The SUV was right on us now. This was no longer surveillance. This was an escort. Selena ran through 3 more calls in rapid sequence, each one short and confirmatory. On schedule, 15 minutes. He's wearing it around his neck. Hasn't taken it off once. Understood. Same location. We'll be there. She ended the last call and gave me a wide smile. There's a place I know, quick stop for lunch, she said. Just a few minutes, Dad. You'll like it. Sounds good, I said. The exit came up on a faded green sign with no name attached. Selena walked me down a 2-lane road that shed buildings and traffic with every mile. After 3 miles, a single structure broke the emptiness. Old roadside bar, weathered sidings, gravel lot, neon beer signs, dark with grime windows filmed with dust. 3 vehicles in the lot. The black SUV. 2 heavy trucks with tinted glass. Here, Selena said. Perfect timing. I parked. The RV engine cooled and ticked. Selena climbed out first, wound up tight, barely containing it. Trent moved like a man walking to a sentence he'd already accepted. I came behind them to the door. The Leica rode around my neck, and I felt its weight, a fake chip inside it that would mark every hand it touched. The EMP device sat in my jacket pocket over my heart. Selena pushed the door open. After the bright Texas sun, the interior hit me as dark. 2 seconds for my eyes to find the room. 8 men. Heavily built, the patient professional stillness of contractors who've waited before and know how to do it without fidgeting. 6 visible weapons, shoulder rigs on 3 hip holsters on 2, a shotgun propped against the bar near the wall. They had been here ahead of us. The door swung shut behind me, solid and final. 2 men at a table near the back stood and drifted to block the rear exit. 2 more adjusted near the front. Front door 2, back door 2. Window to my left, maybe 3 meters, almost certainly locked. 8 total, 6 weapons I could see. I stopped in the middle of the room and went completely still. My right hand drifted without any decision toward my hip, where a concealed weapon would have been if I were running one. Trained reflex. Let them read the instinct. Then I walked it back deliberately, hand dropping away, shoulders coming down. My expression, sliding from alert into something that looked like bewildered confusion. I lowered my hand. Let them believe I hadn't yet understood what kind of room I'd walked into. What I'm about to walk into will decide everything, not just for me, but for someone I thought I understood completely. Before I get there, let me ask you something. If you discovered that a person you'd spent a lifetime protecting had been quietly working to destroy you, would you confront them directly, or would you let the truth surface on its own terms? All 8 men had their eyes on me, running the calculus threat assessment, deciding whether the old man needed to be put down immediately, or whether intimidation would keep him in line. Selena crossed to a table and sat like she owned the place, relaxed and unhurried, because she'd been in this room before. Sit down, Dad, she said, tilting her head toward a chair. Lunch will be here soon. Trent hadn't moved from just inside the door, arms at his sides, the color gone from his face. I ran the count again faster, full tactical red in 4 seconds. Front door 2 men both armed. Back door 2 men both armed. Window on my left 3 meters, probably bolted from the inside, too narrow to clear quickly under fire. 8 hostiles in total, 6 confirmed weapons, unknown number concealed. 1 room, no real cover except whatever tables I could tip. Classic kill box, herd the target into an enclosed space, seal every exit, bring force that can't be answered. Nowhere to move. 8 men, 6 weapons. I could see both exits controlled. and the most dangerous person in the room hadn't drawn a thing because she was standing right beside me, still smiling. I stood in the middle of that bar, 8 armed contractors surrounding me, and what I was thinking about was the EMP device sitting against my chest and the fake chip hanging around my neck. They thought they'd built the cage. They had no idea they were the ones already boxed in. Then the door to the back room opened. The man who stepped through looked like someone who'd never in his life been told no. Calhoun Breck, 52 years old. Texas Energy money, gray suit, Italian shoes, the unhurried smile of a man who'd bought his way past every consequence he'd ever faced. Silver hair, close-cropped and expensive. His watch was worth more than most people's cars. He crossed the room like the space rearranged itself to accommodate him. The 8 mercenaries stiffened, not quite a salute, but close. Deference. This was their employer. He moved toward me at an easy pace, in no hurry, giving me time to take stock of exactly how thoroughly I'd been boxed in. His smile held steady the whole way. "Mr. Hackett." His voice was smooth, the Texas in it sanded down by years of private schooling. "I've heard a great deal about you. Decorated veteran expert in antique firearms, devoted father. Selena speaks very highly of your usefulness." I kept my face still, let my eyes carry confusion rather than recognition. Selena moved from her position and came to stand at Calhoun's side, easy, familiar, like she'd taken that spot 100 times before. She looked at me and smiled. "Dad, this is Calhoun Breck, my business partner." The words landed like something physical. Business partner, not captor, not a threat she was running from, not the dangerous man she needed help escaping. Partner. Every word she'd spoken in that canyon, every manufactured tear, every confessional story about Trent stealing classified files, every moment she'd performed the frightened daughter protecting her family. All of it constructed. All of it lies. Selena looked at me and gave me the smile I'd seen 10,000 times since she was 3 years old. I didn't know the person behind it. Calhoun extended his hand. I shook it, my body moving through the mechanics of courtesy, while my mind absorbed the wreckage. "Please sit," he said, gesturing toward a table. "We have things to discuss." I sat. Trent remained frozen near the door, hands unsteady, face bloodless. No one had looked in his direction. Calhoun settled across from me. Selena took the chair beside him, legs crossed, completely at ease, as if we'd simply come in out of the heat for a meal. "I expect you have questions," Calhoun said. "A few," I got out. He smiled wider. "Let me spare you the effort. The situation is straightforward. The camera you're wearing contains classified United States border tunnel mapping intelligence, highly valuable to parties with an interest in moving goods and people without attracting federal attention." He leaned back, fingers laced. "Selena and I spent 18 months on this acquisition. The logistics were not simple, extracting the intelligence from secure facilities, modifying the camera hardware, mapping the route, and above all, finding the right method of delivery." His eyes moved to her briefly. "Your daughter's improvisation was inspired. She converted a 90-second accident into a 6-day operation." His gaze came back to me. "A decorated Army veteran. Spotless record, no criminal history. Border Patrol waves you through. Checkpoint agents barely slow down to look at your paperwork. You're invisible in exactly the way we needed." The chip, Calhoun went on, was worth $40 million to the right buyers. The route I'd driven had been drawn to thread between every radar gap and checkpoint on the map. Every stop had been deliberate. He gestured toward Selena with something that looked like genuine pride. "Your daughter is exceptional. The planning, the execution, the sustained psychological management required to keep you cooperative for 6 days." He shook his head appreciatively. "Exceptional work." Selena absorbed the compliment without any trace of conflict. just quiet satisfaction at having her competence acknowledged. "We brought you here today," Calhoun said, "because our buyers want eyes on the chip before the final transfer. They'll be here shortly. Once they authenticate it, the funds move and you walk out." He delivered it the way you'd describe processing a routine invoice. "That assumes your cooperation, of course," he added. The smile thinning just slightly. The 8 men in the room shifted almost nothing, just enough. Message received. I looked at Selena, searched her face for whatever remained of the daughter I'd spent my life raising. "Business partner," I said quietly. "How long?" "2 years," she said. No pause, no flicker. Calhoun had made his approach, and she'd evaluated the risk, weighed it against the return, and decided the numbers worked. She was describing treason and her father's arranged death the way someone describes a property transaction. "Business partner," the phrase she'd said, as casually as introducing someone she worked with at an office, not the architect of a plan that ended with me dead in the desert. Calhoun checked his watch. "Our buyers arrive in 30 minutes. I'd suggest you get comfortable, Mr. Hackett. This will be finished soon and you can go back to your life in Albuquerque. Selena assures me you're a reasonable man." "Reasonable," I said. "You're a soldier," Selena said. "A practical man. You understand that in operational terms, people get used as assets. It's not personal, it's strategic." She reached across and laid her hand over mine. The touch was almost tender. "I needed someone the government would trust completely," she continued. "Military background, clean record. Someone who'd never think to question his own daughter. You were the ideal candidate for the role, Dad. You should take some pride in that." Pride. She wanted me to feel pride that she'd turned my love for her into a weapon and used it to commit treason. Calhoun extended his hand toward me as though we were wrapping up a deal in a boardroom, rather than standing inside a room where 8 men had been paid to kill me if I stepped wrong. Selena watched the exchange with something close to satisfaction, the expression of someone watching a complicated plan arrive at its intended conclusion. I looked at her standing there beside him at ease, assured, smiling, and understood I was looking at a stranger who had borrowed my daughter's face. Then I did what reconnaissance had always taught me to do. I asked the question designed to make them believe I still hadn't grasped it. The question that would strip their strategy bare had to sound like bewilderment, not intelligence. I looked at Selena standing next to Calhoun Breck and asked what a trained reconnaissance officer asks, the question that sounds like confusion but forces the target to lay out everything they know. "Selena," I said, keeping my voice carefully level, "tell me why you gave me the camera. Why me specifically?" The question of a rattled father reaching for an explanation, not someone who'd already heard the answer, played back through his earbuds. Selena didn't hesitate. No guilt, no discomfort. She answered with the clean precision of someone walking through the logic of a decision that had already paid off. "It was a mistake at first," she said, the apology completely absent from her voice now. The tears from the canyon were gone. This was the unedited version. "At the lot Saturday morning, I grabbed Trent's case instead of the spare. Didn't realize it until we were 20 minutes down the highway and you already had it around your neck." She tilted back slightly, almost amused at herself. "I had about 90 seconds to decide. Take it back and explain everything, or let it ride." A small shrug. "A decorated Army veteran, clean record, nothing flagged in any database. The kind of man Border Patrol waves through without touching the brakes." Her eyes settled on mine. "The mistake became the plan. The best couriers never know they're carrying anything." Calhoun smiled across the table. "Improvisation under pressure. That's the difference between professionals and everyone else." Selena smiled back at him. I sat across from my daughter and turned it over in my mind. She had taken a 90-second mistake and built a 6-day federal conspiracy out of it. and she was proud. She'd said it like the answer had always been obvious, like I should have worked it out on my own long before now. Insurance, I said. Against betrayal, she said. Calhoun could have taken the chip after the handoff walked away without paying. But with you there armed and trained and protective, that calculation got much more complicated for him. Calhoun allowed a measured smile. Your daughter thinks strategically, he said. I respect that. Selena kept going, warming to it, the way someone does when they're genuinely proud of their own thinking. You're 68, but you kept up your skills. I've watched you at the range. Your reflexes are still there, and you carry concealed. I've known that for years, Dad. Done your laundry long enough to know. She made sure I was keeping up before continuing. If Calhoun decided to take the chip without paying, you'd step in, because that's what fathers do. You'd put yourself between me and the threat, buy me the seconds I needed to move. It's not calculation on your part, it's wiring. 3 decades of training doesn't just go away. She was walking me through how she'd planned to use me as a buffer, the way you'd walk someone through a spreadsheet, measured unhurried, pleased with the math. And if it went sideways, she went on. If Calhoun's people opened fire, you'd occupy their attention while I moved on the chip. Human shield isn't a flattering description, but it fits. You'd absorb the first exchange. That's enough time for me to clear an exit. She nodded toward the back. I spent weeks studying 3 different escape routes from this location. While you were down, I'd already be moving vehicle staged, heading for the Mexican border. $40 million sitting in an offshore account. And every document pointing back to Trent's geological survey signatures, not mine. The room had gone quiet. Even the hired men seemed to find something unsettling in how easily she described planning her father's death. Layered operational security, Selena said. You taught me that phrase when I was 12. Remember backup plans for backup plans, Army thinking. I just applied it here. She smiled at that. You were Layer 1 protection against Calhoun moving against me first. Layer 2 cover if things turned violent. Layer 3, Trent absorbs everything while I disappear. Clean, efficient, maximum survival odds for me. Insurance, I said again. The word felt like ash on my tongue. Insurance. Not father, not family. Insurance. Exactly, she said, satisfied I'd arrived at it. And it held up perfectly. You drove the whole route certain you were shielding your family. That emotional investment made you the right asset. Asset. Not parent, not her father. Asset. Tuh. The elegant part, Selena continued, is that your love for me was the guarantee. A professional courier might have examined the camera, asked hard questions, pushed for more money, but you'd do anything for your daughter. That made you both valuable and disposable. Calhoun laughed softly. As I said, strategic. Exactly why I agreed to bring her on. Selena leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. I'm laying this out, Dad, because I want you to follow the reasoning. Nothing about this is personal. It's survival in a high-stakes environment. You were a soldier. You know better than most that sometimes the mission costs people. That's what this was, a mission where your possible death was an acceptable operational variable. She put her hand over mine. As it happens, Calhoun kept his end of the arrangement, so you won't be dying today. The chip gets authenticated, the funds clear, and everyone walks. But if things had broken differently, she shrugged, I'd have mourned you once I was across the border, and the money was clear. That's not heartless, Dad. It's just a matter of knowing what comes first. I sat there while my daughter walked me through exactly how she'd weighed my life against a $40 million number and landed on the side of the money. She explained it with the composed, step-by-step patience of someone walking through a chess position, every move accounted for, every risk priced. As if I were a piece on the board rather than the man who'd taught her to ride a bike, held her hand on the first day of school, stood in her corner for 43 years. Do you understand now? She asked. Do you see why it had to be you? I understand, I said. And I did. I understood that my daughter had spent months architecting my possible death with the same deliberate attention most people put into planning a trip. I understood she'd taken the love I had for her and turned it into a tactical asset. I understood that in the equation she'd built, my life had a dollar value attached to it, and that value came in below $40 million. She finished and smiled at me, warm, open, the expression of someone expecting to be told they'd done well. She thought I'd follow the logic, thought I'd recognize the craft in using a father's devotion as operational cover. I looked at her and felt something inside me drop to absolute zero. Then Calhoun Breck laughed, and what he said next made everything worse. Calhoun Breck laughed, genuine, unhurried, and pointed toward the front entrance. "Bring him in. Let's show dear old Dad the complete picture." The doors banged open hard, and two of Breck's men hauled someone through like they were dragging cargo. Trent. They'd had him outside or stowed in the RV, either way. They pulled him across the threshold and dropped him in the center of the floor. He hit hard, caught himself on both hands, stayed there on his knees. He lifted his eyes to mine, despair in them, confusion, fear, and something else I couldn't name. "Your son-in-law has been very cooperative," Calhoun said. "I think it's time he explained certain things to you himself." Trent's hands were shaking. Not fatigue. The trembling of someone who'd been containing terror for far too long and had finally run dry. "Tell him," Selena said, her voice stripped of everything. "Tell him what you did." Trent looked at her, then at me, then down at the floor. "I didn't do anything," he said low. "That's what I've been trying to make someone understand. I didn't steal anything. I didn't forge anything. I didn't—" "The signatures," Calhoun cut in. "Explain the signatures." Trent's voice cracked through it. "She forged them. Selena. My name is on the geological survey documents, on the security clearance forms, on every page. I never put my name on anything connected to border tunnel mapping. She pulled my signature off other paperwork, employment contracts, mortgage documents, traced it, reproduced. It made it look like I had authorized everything." He looked up at me again. "I found out 6 months ago, caught her on my laptop going through files I'd never opened. When I confronted her, she showed me what she'd built. All of it forged documents in my name, every paper trail doubling back to me. She told me if I breathed a word to anyone, if I tried to interfere in any way, she'd hand it all to federal authorities, and I'd spend the rest of my life in prison for treason." His hands shook harder. "She put cameras in our apartment," Trent went on, "in my car, at my office, hidden microphones, GPS units. She tracked everything, every person I called, everywhere I went. Around the clock for 6 months. I had no way out, no one I could reach. She showed me the surveillance footage so I'd understand she was always there." Tears had started running down his face. "And I thought—" His voice gave out entirely for a moment. "I thought you were part of it. I saw you wearing one of her cameras on the trip. The Leica. I recognized the model because she'd shown me the technical specs once. So I assumed you were in on it. That your father-in-law was another set of eyes keeping me from running." The words hit me square. He'd seen the camera around my neck and read it as surveillance, another monitor in the network Selena had built around him. "I wasn't," I said. "I didn't know." Trent stared at me, working through it, the realization arriving slowly. "You didn't know," he said quietly. I shook my head. Something broke open in his face, relief and horror arriving at the same moment. Relief that I wasn't his enemy. Horror at what it meant that Selena had run both of us through the same machine without either of us seeing it. Selena watched the exchange without expression. No guilt, no discomfort. Just the neutral attention of someone observing how two variables were processing new data. "Touching," Calhoun said. "But we're running on a schedule, Mr. Hackett. I need that camera. Hand it across now or my men take it." I got to my feet, slowly reached down and helped Trent up with a hand on his shoulder, not quite pulling him, applying upward pressure, making brief eye contact as I did. A signal. The kind that doesn't need words. We're on the same side. I haven't left you. Trent read it. I saw it register. I'm not handing anything over in here, I told Calhoun. Too confined. Too many weapons in too small a space. If this goes wrong, people in the surrounding area take the fallout. Calhoun raised an eyebrow. Concerned about collateral damage. How noble. Concerned about catching a round in a room with no exits, I said. You want the chip, we step outside. Open ground location I choose. That's the arrangement. You're not the one setting terms, Calhoun said. Then you're not getting the chip, I came back. I can wreck it right here. Smash the camera body, shatter the optics. And that chip comes apart in pieces nobody is ever putting back together. Or we do this the way I've described, and everybody gets what they came for. Calhoun's eyes worked over me, running numbers behind them. His crew adjusted palms, sliding towards steel. Where? He said at last. Decommissioned quarry 40 miles west of El Paso. Nothing out there, no people, no cover, wide open. Bring your whole force, and you'll still sleep easy. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Arlo's team had walked every inch of that ground with me, one road and rock walls on all sides, a natural trap the moment Border Patrol Special Forces sealed the entrance. Tomorrow, Calhoun said. Plenty of time for you to disappear. Plenty of time for you to do your homework, I said. Pull the satellite feed. Drive out tonight if it settles your nerves. The site does exactly what you need. Total isolation, 0 witnesses, no badge within 50 miles. Past the bar window, I could make out our RV sitting in the lot. The dish on the roof was still turning slow circles. Selena was up there and the data still running her surveillance, even while everything she'd engineered was coming apart seam by seam. Calhoun let the silence stretch. Then the corner of his mouth pulled up. 10 tomorrow, the quarry. You don't show or I smell a single Fed your son-in-law doesn't walk out. Are we clear? Shua. Clear, I said. Breck put out his hand like a man wrapping up a deal he'd already won, and I took it knowing that 48 hours from now, I'd either be watching him go into cuffs or they'd be shoveling sand over me next to my son. 48 hours bled into 40, into 20, into the longest stretch of dark I'd ever sat through a photograph in my lap, and first light a long way off. The motel room carried the scent of industrial cleaner and all the quiet desperation that had soaked into those walls over the years. And I perched on the bed's edge with a picture of my daughter taken when she still looked at me like I was worth something. 6 years old, gap-toothed grin holding a sunflower she'd picked from the garden bed. Those eyes full of the kind of pure happiness that hasn't learned yet what it means when someone you love turns on you. That photo had lived in my wallet for 27 years. Through every deployment through the day, I buried her mother through every low point when I had to reach for a reason to keep going. And now here I was, studying it one final time before I played my part in putting her behind federal bars. My phone went off. Encrypted line. I picked up. Border Patrol Special Forces are confirmed, Arlo said, no lead-in. They'll hold the quarry perimeter till 10. You get 2 minutes on your own before we flood in. 2 minutes. 120 seconds walk out or don't, because that's when the cavalry rolls. 2 minutes is enough, I told him. Make sure Trent gets clear once it gets loud. Understood. He's first priority for extraction. Breck's people won't have time to react before we pull him. Arlo went quiet a beat. Vernon, leave her to it. Don't try to pull her back. That decision was hers. I stared down at the photo. 5-year-old Selena, who used to think her father had answers for everything. I know. EMP device. I pressed 2 fingers against my jacket. Thumb-sized cylinder right over my sternum. Set. And the fake chip. My hand went to the Leica hanging at my chest, seated, indistinguishable from the genuine article. Weapon hip holster loaded, safety engaged. Good. The moment we breach, drop flat, don't hesitate. Announce yourself as a federal asset and keep your hands where they can be seen. My people have you on the friendly list, but the chaos has a way of scrambling that. Copy. Vern. Arlo's tone came down a notch. I wish this had gone another way. Same. I ended the call and tucked the photograph back behind the leather. Snapped the wallet shut. Buried it in my pocket so I wouldn't be tempted to look again before it was done. That image of 5-year-old Selena beaming at whoever was holding the camera weighed less than a round in a chamber. But I'd carried heavier things with less trouble. No sleep. None. I worked through every tactical scenario I could build until 4:00 a.m., then gave up and got to my feet. The quarry was where I'd told Breck it would be no surprises there. 40 miles out from El Paso, reached by a single dirt track that pushed through scrub desert before spilling into a bowl of red rock, carved out by whatever forces had been grinding at this land for 10,000 years. 3 sides of sheer cliff, maybe 200 meters straight up. One way in, a textbook kill box for whoever held elevation. Today, that elevation belonged to federal snipers. I rolled in at 9:45 a.m. Calhoun Breck had beaten me their convoy, already spread out 3 heavy SUVs flanking the RV we'd hauled across 4 states. 8 mercenaries had taken up posts around the rim with the kind of spacing that told you somebody among them had real training. They'd claimed the heights, or figured they had. What they didn't know was that Border Patrol Special Forces had gone invisible out there since 4:00 a.m., tucked into the rock in full camouflage, every man watching through precision glass. Selena was on the quarry floor near Breck, standing a half step behind his shoulder. Sunglasses on, even at this hour, her attention locked on me, running her assessments, the same cold arithmetic she'd applied to every piece of this scheme. Trent was off to my left, maybe 20 meters out, 2 of Breck's men bracketing him. Our eyes met. I gave him the barest dip of my chin. Hold steady, we're nearly there. I pulled in, killed the engine, and stepped out. The Leica settled against my sternum, weighted with a counterfeit chip that would unravel every person who laid hands on it. A dry wind moved through the quarry like something alive, and the dust it kicked up coiled in lazy columns around Breck's feet. Good instinct choosing open ground, old man, Breck said. Hard to run a play with no shadows to hide in. He's not running a play, Calhoun, Selena cut in. Sentiment is his problem, not strategy. He dragged the camera all the way out here. He's still telling himself he's a photographer. She turned that smile on me, the exact same one I'd been carrying in my wallet for 27 years. Different woman behind it now. I always see things through, I said. You're the one who drilled that into me, Selena. Her expression opened up, satisfied. She took it to mean I'd deliver what she'd sent me to deliver. What I meant was that I'd see my family protected right down to the last piece, her included. Breck snapped his fingers, and the 8 men tightened their ring around me. Arms out, not raised, yet the quiet theater of force. The chip, Breck said. My people confirm it's real, the money moves, and everybody goes home. I glanced at my watch. 9:52 a.m., 8 minutes to federal entry. 6 until the shooting started. I needed clock. Authentication isn't instant, I said. Your gear in the vehicle. Yes, Breck said. Camera first, then we talk. Other way around, I said. That was the arrangement. You prove the chip is what it is, then the camera changes hands. Not a step sooner. Something tightened behind Breck's eyes. You have no leverage here. Neither do you, not over what you're about to spend a fortune on. I came back. Could be a decoy. Could be inert. Could be a prop. You willing to wire $40 million on faith to a man you just put a gun to? Breck chewed on that. His right hand dropped toward his belt. 9:54 a.m., 6 minutes. Dad? Selena's voice soft-edged. Stop turning this into something it isn't. Hand over the camera and let's close it out. Nobody's making this complicated, I said. I'm protecting the integrity of the exchange. That's what serious people do. Breck held my stare a long beat, then turned his head. Get the reader. 9:56 a.m., 4 minutes. One of the mercenaries broke toward the nearest SUV and came back carrying a hardshell case. Breck popped the latch's portable analyzer interface cable's diagnostic array laid out in foam. The camera, he said, palm open. 9:58 a.m. Breck raised 2 fingers, and every one of his 8 men brought their muzzles up. Selina stood at his side, her wrist coming up to check the time. 9:58 a.m. 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. I could hold 2 minutes. But I had to make sure those 2 minutes were theirs to spend on each other, not on me. My hand went into my jacket and came back out with the recording device raised where the sun hit it. The thing was small and black and said nothing about what it was. Consumer hardware. Could have been anything off a shelf. Completely forgettable. Breck's gaze sharpened. What is that? A courtesy, I said. Something you need to hear before this goes any further. I hit play. Selina's voice broke across the quarry floor, sharp and clean in the cool morning air. A call she'd made late days ago picked up by the unit I'd slipped beneath the RV's dining table. The old man has the device. Let him draw Breck's men into a crossfire. While they're shooting at each other, I'll move in and take the chip. The color left Selina's face. The recording didn't pause for her. Her voice continued clipped and businesslike, the same register she might use laying out a quarterly projection. Trent takes the blame. His name is on the geological surveys, the signature, the paper trail, it all runs to him. Move the 40 million into my private account, the moment authentication clears. The quarry went absolutely still. Even the wind quit. Breck turned to look at Selina with the measured slowness of a man deciding how angry he's allowed to be. You were going to burn me. Quiet, measured, lethal. After everything that was agreed between us, Selina pulled herself together fast. You had to give her that. Old reflex contain reframe redirect. Hugged. He spliced that together. It's out of context. You understand how audio can be manipulated. What I understand, Breck said, cutting straight through her, is that I just heard your voice arranging to rob me. Your voice, your words. The 8 mercenaries held their ground, but you could feel the allegiance in the air go liquid, eyes sliding, waiting Breck or Selina, whoever moved first. I clicked off the playback and let the device disappear into my pocket. Let the silence stay where it was. 20 meters away, Trent stood fixed on Selina. Everything he had no words for was written plainly across his face. Years of blackmail, months of terror, weeks of forced compliance while she'd pulled every string in his life. And now here was the proof she'd always intended to leave him holding the bag. Trent looked at his wife the way soldiers look at incoming fire from the one direction they never thought to cover. Selina, Breck said, his voice stripped to something flat and cold. Explain this. It's doctored, she tried. He must have... That's your voice. Breck cut her off. That's the background noise from your apartment. That's the phone you always use. Don't waste my time. Selina's face went rigid. The act fell away. She pulled herself up and dropped the wounded innocent routine entirely. You think I'm naive, she said. You're a criminal, Calhoun. Criminals don't respect agreements once they can take the whole pot. I needed a way out that worked for me. That's just sound thinking. Sound thinking. Breck said the words back at her. Ho! You were going to let your own father die, rob me blind, and vanish with the lot. Yes, Selina said, plain as that. Because you'd have done exactly the same to me if you'd gotten there first. Breck's jaw went tight. Suh. You think I wouldn't track it? The moment that money moved, I'd have eyes on every wire. Your money. Selena's voice climbed. I'm the one who delivered the asset. I'm the one who invested 18 months building this operation from nothing. I'm the one who put the chip in your hands. You were just the buyer. Another wealthy man who confuses having cash with having power. The mercenaries' aim went loose, no longer fixed on me. Their rifles drifted back and forth between Breck and Selena, waiting on an order that wasn't coming from either direction. Lower your weapons, Breck commanded. Nobody moved. Split loyalty, two bosses, no clear signal. I said lower your weapons. Breck's voice cracked the air. Selena retreated a half step, her hand moving for the concealed piece at her side. Don't, Breck warned. I stood without moving at the center of the quarry floor, watching my daughter and her partner tear into each other precisely the way I'd counted on. Neither of them had a thought left for me. Neither was tracking the chip, the fake evidence, or the net tightening around them from the cliffs above. They were burning everything on each other. When your enemies are busy destroying one another, I said quietly, patience is the only move. Neither of them heard me. They were deep into it. Shh. You think you're sharp, Breck said, closing the distance toward Selena. You think you outplayed me, but I've been doing this 30 years. I've buried people who were smarter than you. Then you should have read the board better, Selena fired back. I told you what you needed to hear, wore the face you were expecting, let you feel like you were running things. Basic misdirection. I picked that up from watching you work. You learned nothing, Breck snarled, except how to wreck your own family chasing money you'll never get to spend. My family was already wrecked long before I made use of it, Selena said. I just recognized what was there. The wind carried their voices up the quarry walls and threw them back down as echoes, every accusation doubling in the rock. Breck's hand went toward his holster. Selena stepped back, her weapon half clear of its concealment. The mercenaries swept their rifles between the two of them, waiting on orders that kept contradicting each other. I checked my watch. 10:00 a.m. Exactly. Then I heard what I'd been holding my breath for, rotor blades chopping through the desert air above the rim. I glanced at my watch again. 10:00 a.m. Exactly. Time to bring this home. 3 steps forward, the Leica M6 level in both hands. Breck's pistol swung toward me. Selena's weapon still half drawn. 8 rifles covering every angle of the bowl. The helicopters hammered in closer. Here, I said, holding the camera out toward Breck. You win. Take your 40 million. Something shifted behind Breck's eyes. He reholstered and grabbed the Leica with both hands, cradling it with the care you'd give something fragile and irreplaceable. Selena went still, weapon dropping, confusion crossing her face. The memory card, Breck breathed. His fingers found the card slot on the camera's base plate. Bottom of the body, press the cover, I said. He reached for the base of the camera. The instant his fingers made contact with the bottom plate, I triggered the remote in my jacket pocket. The EMP fired with a sound like tearing silk. No flash, no bang, just an invisible pulse rolling outward at the speed of light. Every electronic device within 500 meters died in the same instant. Breck's phone went black. The mercenaries' radios popped once and went silent. GPS receivers, satellite uplinks, every communication device gone. The helicopters above banked sharply, radio contact cut. Breck stared at the Leica, then at me. What did you— Electromagnetic pulse, I said. Custom built. A camera body is a perfect shell for it, nobody thinks to search one. Selena let out a sharp laugh. You magnificent bastard. The helicopters came down without radio contact, pilots working hand signals. Border Patrol Special Forces fast-roped in 12 operators in tactical kit rifles, up-sealing the quarry from 4 points of the compass. Armored vehicles pushed through both access points. Breck's mercenaries folded immediately. No comms meant no coordination, no plan to fall back on. They broke for vehicles for the quarry rim anywhere. The operators didn't chase. 4 of them moved straight to Trent, wrapping a tight protective box around my son and walking him toward an armored vehicle. I watched him stumble as they guided him clear. Breck ran, not for the vehicles north out toward the open scrubland where the quarry mouth met the desert flats. He still had the Leica clutched in his left hand, his right dropping toward his holster. I raised the rifle slowly, feeling the walnut stock's familiar weight settle against my shoulder. Pre-64 action, the smoothest bolt ever made. Scope mounted in 1986, zeroed at 200 yards. Breck was moving fast, 30 yards out, then 40, then 50. The operators held their positions and watched. A team leader turned his head and gave me a single nod. Authorization. I worked the bolt. It slid like oiled glass. Breck crossed 70 yards. Through the scope, I could see the sweat sheeting down the back of his neck, the Leica swinging in his grip. 80 yards. Fast for a man of 52. I held 6 inches of lead on him, factored in wind and the gentle downslope beneath his feet. My finger settled on the trigger. At exactly 104 yards, I squeezed. The recoil drove into my shoulder. Through the scope, I watched Breck's right leg give out as the 308 round found his thigh precisely where I'd called it. He went down hard, rolled twice. The Leica spun free from his hand. I lowered the rifle, ran the bolt, and caught the ejected brass hot against my palm. Then I brought the muzzle to my lips and blew across the crown to clear the smoke. Theatrical, sure, but I'd waited the better part of 40 years for that shot. Operators converged on Breck weapons forward. 2 medics came in behind them with a stretcher. They'd hold the bleeding and keep him breathing. He'd live long enough for a courtroom. I turned back. Selena stood exactly where I'd left her weapon holstered, hands relaxed at her sides. She was smiling. Not the predator smile, something different. Something that landed in my gut like a stone. "Beautiful shot," she called from 30 yards. "Same as you taught me." 4 operators came in from behind, weapons raised. "Selena Hack, you are under arrest for 18 counts." "I know." She said it before they finished, never pulling her eyes from mine. Her hands came up slowly as they moved in. "Vernon, darling, there's one question you ought to be sitting with." They zip-tied her wrists and started reading her rights. "What question?" I said. "Why did I let you win?" They walked her toward an armored vehicle. She went without a struggle, still carrying that smile. Past the vehicle, where they were loading Trent, my son, safe on his feet. Past where Breck's mercenaries had been posted. Past the dead perimeter of fried electronics. At the vehicle door, she turned back once. "That memory card in the camera," she called out. "Ask yourself whose account it's actually keyed to." Then she was inside the door, shut the vehicle, moving for the exit. I stood there, rifle in hand, watching federal agents work the quarry. Watching them lift Breck onto a medical helicopter. Watching them handle me like a cooperating witness, a man who'd just handed them 18 federal cases gift-wrapped. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The memory card. $40 million set to transfer on first insertion. I'd told Breck it would feed his numbered account. I'd told the FBI it would route to federal seizure. Whose account had Selena actually pointed it at? A young operator came up, professional, unhurried. "Mr. Hackett, we'll need your statement and the rifle for ballistics." I passed him the Winchester stock first action open safe. "He'll make it?" I asked. "Clean through and through, bones intact. He'll stand trial." The operator paused a beat. "Hell of a shot." I had time to aim. Trent came out of the armored vehicle, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat, and walked toward me. His face was hollowed out, worn down to the frame, but his eyes were present. Behind him, the Texas sky ran blue and cloudless from wall to wall. The shot's echo had long since died against the quarry walls and dissolved into the Texas air. "Done." The cuffs closed around my daughter's wrists with a sound like a vault ceiling. 2 federal agents flanked Selena, 43 years old, my only child. One of them, tall female badge reading Kephart, cinched the restraints while her partner began the Miranda recitation. Ms. Selena Hackett, you are under arrest for espionage, blackmail, and conspiracy to commit treason. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Dad, Selena's voice came across 30 yards of quarry dust. I'm your daughter. You can't just turn your back on me, Dad. I turned away. Trent stood beside me, still wrapped in that blanket, watching his wife with eyes that had gone somewhere far and hollow. Behind us, medical helicopters lifted Breck toward federal custody. Around us, operators methodically locked down evidence across the quarry floor. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I did it for us, Selena screamed. For the family, Dad, please. I kept moving, one foot, then the next, toward the armored vehicles staged at the quarry's east entrance. Gravel ground under my boots, that same sound from 40 years back. Walking away from my father's grave with the promise I'd keep this family whole. I'd held half of it. You have the right to an attorney. Dad, please. Her voice broke apart. Don't do this. I'm sorry, Dad. Trent walked beside me and said nothing. He didn't look back either. Maybe he'd carry that away from today. How to keep your feet moving when stopping would pull you under. Agent Kephart's voice drifted across the distance. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you? I didn't catch Selena's answer. I was 50 yards off by then, closing on where Arlo Pittman stood, watching with his arms folded across his chest. The quarry spread around us like a bowl built to hold sorrow. Dust devils worked across the open ground where Breck had gone down. The EMP's pulse was long gone, but the quiet it had left behind felt like it intended to stay. Her voice, carrying Dad across all that open stone, sounded exactly the way it had when she was 5 and scraped her knee on the driveway. The difference was, this time there was nothing to fix. I got to the vehicles. Trent stopped beside me and let the blanket slide off his shoulders. His hands were trembling. Mine weren't. 40 years of discipline sees to that. Mr. Hackett, Arlo stepped forward and put out his hand. I took it. Walk with me. We angled toward the quarry's south wall. Trent stayed back near the vehicles, talking low with a Border Patrol medic. The real chip reached the Pentagon 2 days ago, Arlo said. No lead-in, no cushioning. Puh. Breck never had what he came for. Neither did she. I stopped mid-step. What? The memory card in that camera. Arlo pulled a small evidence bag from inside his jacket, a standard SD card inside it. Blank. Factory formatted. No encryption, no transfer protocols, no $40 million. The desert air thinned around me. Then what was she? Running both of you, Arlo said. She sold Breck on the idea that the chip was in the camera. She sold you on the idea that she'd wired it to drain the money. The shape of it came clear. The actual classified chip went out in a diplomatic pouch to Pentagon security 48 hours before this operation ever started. You handled Breck perfectly, Vernon, but she was running an entirely separate play. I looked back toward where they were getting Selena into the transport. She'd quit screaming. She just stood there now, head down, shoulders moving. From that distance, I couldn't read whether she was crying or whether something in her had decided this was funny. And Selena? I asked. Arlo pocketed the evidence bag. You just shut down the most significant intelligence breach in a decade. 18 federal charges. If Breck had laid hands on that chip, the real one, we'd be talking about damage that doesn't get repaired. He let a moment pass. That's what this was about. That's not what I asked. 40 years federal correctional institution. No parole consideration before 25. His voice came down a register. "I'm sorry." Those two words sat in the air between us and didn't move. Life sentence. My daughter. The girl who placed first in her 8th grade science fair, who taught herself 3 languages out of sheer stubbornness. Life sentence. She made her choices, I said. Yes, Arlo said. And you made yours. Back behind us, the transport engine turned over. The low grind of diesel, the hard clang of doors being secured. Selena would be in a holding facility by sundown, arraigned inside 72 hours, sentenced inside 6 months. Trent, I asked. Clean. Every charge dropped, full exoneration. Border Patrol has the paperwork ready. He walks. Arlo glanced toward where my son was standing. He'll need time to get his footing back. What she ran on him, the manipulation, the framing, that kind of wound, doesn't close on any schedule. I know. You did the right thing. Knowing that doesn't make it sit any lighter. It never does, Arlo said. Walking away while they put your daughter in restraints, it's like losing a limb you can't do without. You do it because you have to. The ache doesn't go anywhere. The transport carrying Selena rolled past us, headed for the quarry exit. Tinted glass, armored panels, federal plates. I didn't turn my head to follow it. I kept my eyes on Trent, standing alone by the armored vehicle. Vernon! Arlo's hand came down on my shoulder, brief and firm. What you did here, stopping Breck, locking down the chip, getting your son out. That's what your father would have wanted from you. My father would have wanted me to protect both of his grandchildren's parents. Your father would have wanted you to choose right when Easy was standing right next to it. That's what you did. The transport passed through the exit and left a dust trail hanging in the air. When it settled, Selena was gone. Just that quickly. 43 years of being someone's daughter reduced to a case number at DOJ and a slot on a transport manifest. Her voice had chased me across the gravel, growing smaller and more raw with every step I put between us. I kept walking. Behind me, the federal engines faded until there was nothing taking the last piece of my family I had any claim to. The Department of Homeland Security field office in El Paso smelled like burned government coffee and the particular fluorescent-lit stillness that only settles into buildings where consequential things get handled, slowly buried under one form at a time. Trent and I had been brought in after the quarry in a federal vehicle, the kind of unmarked SUV that projects authority without advertising it. Neither of us said a word the whole ride. We were still hearing things that hadn't finished echoing. A junior agent walked us to a conference room on the 2nd floor. Clean table, 8 chairs, a water pitcher, a window. Nobody had touched that looked out over a parking structure. The room had been designed to feel neutral about whatever walked in. It mostly pulled that off. We sat for 15 minutes before the door opened. Federal investigator Harlan Vickery, 46, carried the particular weight of a man who'd spent 2 decades turning hard situations into manageable ones through relentless organizational discipline. Sharp eyes set behind wireframe glasses, temples going silver, his documents stacked with that edge-aligned precision that comes from enough years in the work that even the paperwork starts to obey you. He put a thick folder on the table, drew out the chair at the head, and settled in with the unhurried ease of a man who knew exactly how much what he was about to say mattered, and felt no pressure to rush toward it. "Thank you both for coming in," he said. "I recognize this has been a difficult day." Trent's hands rested flat on the table. I'd been holding the same posture since we sat down, the body language of a man trying to look steadier than he feels and putting real effort into it. "Mr. Dillard," Vickery said, opening the folder and pressing his glasses back against the bridge of his nose. "I want to start with you. You and I wanted to be completely direct about where things stand." Trent didn't shift in his seat. "All right. Based on all evidence gathered over the course of this operation, digital forensics from Selena Hackett's personal and professional devices audio recordings captured during the transit and the testimony you gave this morning, this office and the Department of Justice have reached the following determination. Vickery looked up. You are cleared of all charges, every single one. The investigation into your alleged involvement in the theft and smuggling of classified defense technology is closed, effective this hour, with a finding of no involvement whatsoever. He gave that a moment to land. You were a victim of systematic coercion. The forged signatures, the fabricated paper trails, the 6-month surveillance operation she ran against you, all of it has been documented, verified, and attributed to Selina Hackett as the sole architect. Where your compliance occurred, it was extracted through blackmail under duress. Under federal law, that compliance doesn't register as culpability. Trent's shoulders dropped in one long, controlled exhale, 6 months of held breath finally finding the door. The forged signatures, I said. Every document carrying his name. Traced back to her device, Vickery confirmed. We recovered the source materials she worked from, an employment contract from 2020, mortgage documents from 2019, a legal waiver from his engineering firm. She'd rehearsed his signature through multiple digital drafts before producing the final versions used in the border mapping files. Forensic handwriting analysis leaves no room for argument. He looked at Trent again. She was meticulous, but meticulous people generate meticulous evidence once you know the shape of what you're hunting for. The surveillance equipment she installed, Trent said, in the apartment at my office, recovered and cataloged. 17 units across 4 locations, every one of them registered to email accounts she built using your credentials. Another layer of the frame. Vickery's delivery stayed level professional, but underneath it lived the restrained distaste of someone who found this variety of case genuinely repugnant and had simply gotten practiced at keeping that somewhere private. Her goal was total control over you. The most effective way to achieve that is to make the target believe they're already implicated, that fighting it only deepens the hole. It worked, Trent said quietly. 6 months. It worked without a hitch. That reflects the sophistication of what she built, not any shortcoming on your part. Vickery slid a single sheet across the table. Official DHS letterhead, dense legal language, a signature line waiting at the bottom. This is your formal exoneration document. Your signature here closes the investigation and initiates the expungement of any investigative record bearing your name in connection with this case. Trent picked up the pen. His hand was steady now in a way it hadn't been all week. He signed deliberate, unhurried. Trent Dillard, 45 years old. No longer a suspect. No longer a man pinned inside someone else's architecture of guilt. He set the pen down and looked across the table at me. Thank you, Dad. The word landed the way it had out at the quarry, like something with weight. Something that needed a beat to settle. He'd said it before years back when Selina and I had still been in each other's lives with some regularity. Then the gap had widened, fed by my absence and her quiet maneuvering. And the word had simply stopped appearing. Hearing it again in a federal conference room in El Paso felt like recovering something I'd quietly stopped expecting to get back. You're the one who made it through, I said. We both did. He held my eyes for a moment, then dropped his gaze to the table. What comes next for you? Same as always, I said. Go back to the shop. Fix old guns. Keep the lights on. Vickery gave us the moment, then gathered his documents and rose. Agent Pittman is waiting in conference room B with the federal prosecutor. She wants to brief both of you on final sentencing before we wrap up today. He put his hand out to Trent, then to me. Mr. Hackett, what you did this week is the kind of thing that won't ever see a headline. I want to say it here in this room on the record. You conducted yourself with the discipline and judgment of a man who understood precisely what was at stake and didn't let it break him. This office owes you more than it can give back. I shook his hand. Just get them sentenced. That's already underway. Conference room B was smaller, a working space, not a presentation room. Arlo stood at the window with his arms crossed, watching us come in, with the look of a man who's been holding something large together for days and is only now letting himself breathe a fraction. Federal Prosecutor Irene Thorne, 53, sat at the table, with 3 thick folders arranged with surgical precision. Silver-streaked hair, sharp eyes, 3 decades of DOJ service visible in the way she commanded the room without making any effort to. Mr. Hackett, Mr. Dillard. She gestured toward the chairs. Please. We sat. Trent kept close. Thorne opened the first folder. I'll be direct with both of you because you've earned that today. Selena Hackett, age 43, federal charges treason under 18 U.S.C. Section 794, smuggling classified defense technology extortion under color of authority. Conspiracy to commit espionage and conspiracy to commit murder, specifically the planned death of Vernon Hackett, as documented in the audio recording. She looked up. Combined federal sentencing guidelines 40 years, no possibility of parole before 25 years served. The number settled over the room. At 40 years, I said. Correct. She will be 68 years old at first parole eligibility. The sentencing hearing is set for 90 days from today. Given the weight of documented evidence, a guilty plea is the most likely outcome. Her public defender has already signaled she understands what she's facing. 40 years. I'd been 68 since March. The arithmetic assembled itself in the back of my mind without invitation. When my daughter could first walk out of a federal facility, I'd be 93. The math of consequences. Thorne opened the second folder. Calhoun Breck, age 52. The charges covered everything in Selena's case, plus running a criminal network involved in technology smuggling across 12 countries, conspiracy to traffic classified military intelligence to foreign state actors, and 3 outstanding warrants from prior investigations he'd slipped for 8 years. She turned a page. The network dismantlement operation that ran parallel to yours over the past 48 hours resulted in 63 arrests across 12 countries. His buyers, his go-betweens, his entire distribution chain. It's the largest single counterintelligence closure this office has been part of in over a decade. She shut the second folder. Breck is expected to receive life without parole. He won't stand in open court again. Arlo spoke from his place by the window. The EMP gave us the coordination window we needed. When his network went dark at the same moment, no one could warn anyone. Nobody ran. We swept them all. He looked at me. That was your construction, Vernon. You built the trap. She helped, I said. Arlo came close to a smile. She did. Trent leaned forward slightly. And my wife, his voice was careful, measured. What happens to her now in practical terms? Where does she actually go? Thorne's expression gave a degree. Federal Correctional Facility. She'll be processed through the Western District within 30 days of sentencing, given the nature of the charge's high-security placement. She paused. I understand this is your family, Mr. Dillard. I won't pretend otherwise. I understand, Trent said. I just needed to know. Thorne slid the last document across to me, the witness statement. Dense legal language that compressed 6 days of surveillance deception and federal coordination into clinical bullet points and timestamps. I read it through completely. Every line was accurate. Every fact was correct. The law's precise, bloodless vocabulary doing its work on events that had been anything but bloodless or precise. I picked up the pen. Vernon Hackett, witness, September 28, 2023. And that's it, I asked. That's it, Thorne confirmed. Both of you are free to go. Mr. Dillard, a federal liaison, will be in touch within 30 days for a standard debriefing. Beyond that, you have no further obligations to this office. She stood and put her hand out to each of us. Professional warmth, the kind that isn't born from ease but from enough years of hard work that you understand bone deep how much some days cost. I got up to leave. Trent rose with me. At the door, I stopped, hand on the frame. "The 40 million, I said. The memory card whose account was it actually keyed to? Arlo and Thorne exchanged a glance. "Still under analysis," Arlo said, which meant they had an answer and weren't ready to share it. Maybe they never would be. I put it where I kept the things that wouldn't resolve and walked out into the El Paso afternoon with my son beside me. We drove away from the DHS office without talking, two men whose entire world had been taken apart and put back together in the span of a week. And neither of us had language yet for what came next. Trent sat in the passenger seat of the rental I'd picked up outside the Federal building. His hands lay flat on his thighs, no longer shaking. Just still. The particular stillness of someone who's been running long enough that stopping feels like a trap, like the body doesn't trust solid ground yet. "Where do you want to go?" I asked. He looked out at the El Paso traffic. Afternoon sun turned everything sharp and gold. "Anywhere that's not here." I drove west out of the city, leaving behind the Federal buildings and processing centers and fluorescent-lit rooms that smelled like burned coffee and accumulated paperwork. The highway opened into the wide, flat reach of West Texas scrubland, an open sky pressing in from every direction. Mountains barely sketched on the horizon. Nothing to interrupt the distance for 50 miles running. "There's a campground outside Marfa," I said. "Quiet. Cell service you can mostly ignore." Trent almost smiled. "Sounds about right." We pulled in as the sun ran low, the sky moving from blue into the deep orange and violet that West Texas manages better than anywhere else I've been. I set out 2 folding chairs beside the RV while Trent got a small fire going in the ring. Neither of us said much. We just moved around each other the way people do when something too big for words has happened. And they both understand without saying so. That silence is the right first language. By the time the stars came out, and out there they come out like a full accounting of everything a city swallows, we had beers in hand, and the fire had settled to a low, comfortable burn. "She told me you'd checked out," Trent said at last. His voice was quiet, directed at the fire. "Years ago. Said after you retired you just drifted. That the army was the only thing that ever meant anything to you, and without it you became someone none of them recognized." "She wasn't entirely wrong," I said. He looked over at me. "But the way she told it, she made it worse than it was." "She always knew where to cut," I said. "She learned that from watching me work. 30 years of reading people, finding the pressure points, the load-bearing walls. She watched and took notes, then turned it on the people closest to her." I tilted the beer back. "That's on me. It's not—" "Let me finish." I set the bottle down on the arm of the chair. "There were operations I couldn't talk about. Kosovo and 99 Balkan surveillance through 2000. The kind of work that doesn't follow you home, or it does, but only in fragments and not the useful kind. I thought staying quiet was how I protected everyone, protected Selena." I paused. "What I actually did was leave gaps wide enough for someone to build a whole other version of me inside them." Trent was quiet for a stretch. The fire cracked and threw a small scatter of sparks up into the dark. "She showed me photographs," he said. "Dozens of them. You at airports, Zurich, Prague, Bangkok. Timestamps stacked up against school plays, Christmas mornings, her graduation. She spread them across the kitchen table 6 months ago and said, Look at what kind of man your father-in-law is. Look at what he put ahead of his own family." "The photographs were real," I said. "What she did with them was poison. I know that now." He picked at the label on his bottle. "But 6 months ago I was already scared, and she knew exactly which pieces to use. I didn't have the space to push back." I nodded slowly. She needed you to believe I wouldn't come if you called. That way there was nowhere for you to turn, and it worked." His voice slipped slightly. He pulled it back. "For 6 months it worked without a crack. I signed what she told me to sign, stood where she placed me, kept quiet when she said to keep quiet. Because I genuinely believed that if I didn't, I'd be walking into federal prison for things I never touched." He let out a slow breath. "And I think I actually believed that if it came down to a choice, you'd pick her side over mine." "I almost didn't reach you in time," I said. "If that camera had gone through the way she intended, but it didn't." Trent finally looked at me straight on. His eyes were steadier than they'd been all week. "Because she made a mistake. One mistake, and it was over in about 1/90 of a second," I said. "Wrong case at the rental lot. She handed me your camera instead of whatever she'd meant to use. And then she spent 6 days trying to build a federal operation out of that accident." I shook my head. "Sharpest person in every room she ever walked into. Always had been. But even the tightest operation collapses when the opening move goes wrong. She couldn't start from scratch. She had to keep working with what was already moving." "And you figured it out?" "Not right away. She's good. The Canyon confession would have landed on most people. Probably should have landed on me." I lit a cigarette, the flame briefly sharp against the dark. "But I'd spent 30 years running the exact same kind of play she tried to run on me. You can't use that playbook against someone who helped develop it. The coyotes started up somewhere out in the scrubland. One long call, then an answer, then a third voice from further east." Trent listened to them for a moment. "What happens to her now?" he asked. 40 years, I said. Federal correctional institution. No parole before 25. I let that sit. "She'll be 83 when she walks out." He took that in. I watched it move through him the way grief moves through someone who's been hurt by a person they loved. It doesn't come clean. It arrives tangled with relief and anger and something that resists naming some residual tenderness that reason can't fully clear out. "I'm not going to sit here and claim I feel nothing," he said. "I'm not asking you to. She's my wife. Was." He caught himself, said it quieter. "Whatever she became, whatever she did there were years before any of this, when she was just—" He stopped, found another angle. "She made good coffee in the mornings. She remembered every birthday. She laughed at stupid things. She was a real person, and I loved her, and I'm still—" His jaw tightened. "I'm still allowed to grieve that person, even if she buried her somewhere along the way." "She was real," I said. "The person she turned into decided the one she'd been wasn't worth holding on to." I drew on the cigarette. "That's not yours to carry, and it's not mine. We both loved someone who chose to use that love as a tool. At some point, that's her accounting, not ours. We sat with that for a while. The fire dropped to orange coals. The stars didn't shift, but seemed to sharpen as the night went deeper, the Milky Way pulling itself into focus." "Your position at the university," I said at last. "Austin. I called them this afternoon while you were finishing the DHS paperwork. The opening's still there." He almost smiled. "Apparently, geological engineering lecturers are hard to hold on to. You'll be good at it. I'll be starting over at 45. "Could be worse," I said. "Could be starting over inside a federal correctional institution." He laughed, real laughter, the kind that's been held under pressure and comes out a little ragged at the edges. "True." The laugh softened into something quieter. "I don't know how to thank you. I've been sitting with it all afternoon, and I keep coming up empty." "Then stop looking," I said. "Dad." The word came out before he'd planned it. He caught himself surprised by his own mouth. "I'm not sure when I started thinking of you that way. Maybe a little bit always. She told me you'd walked away from all of us, but some part of me never fully—" He let it go. Unfinished, shook his head. "I'm sorry it took all of this to get here." The word hit the same way it had in the DHS conference room, like something finally clicking back into alignment. Painful and right. Go build a good life, I said. That's all the thanks I need. Morning arrived with that particular quality of Texas light that cuts away everything soft and shows you what's actually there. No gentleness, no flattery. Trent loaded his rental car while I made coffee on the RV's small stovetop. Neither of us said much. We'd said what needed saying the night before, and the rest of it was just the long, quiet work of healing that no single conversation under the stars can finish. I walked him out to the car. He set his bag in the trunk and turned to face me. Will I see you again? You know where to find me, I said, and this time I'll pick up when you call. He shook my hand, then pulled me into a quick embrace. Stiff, a little awkward, both of us more at home with silence than with this. But we made the effort. That was the whole point. I watched the rental car move off down the 2-lane highway, heading east toward Austin, toward whatever he'd build from what was left. The taillights caught once at a curve, and then were gone. I stood there a beat longer than I needed to. Then I climbed back into the RV and drove west. Texas released its grip slowly. The land stayed vast and flat, and completely indifferent to whatever human business had been settled across it this past week. I drove through the morning and on into the afternoon, no particular hurry, nothing waiting on me. Albuquerque would be there when I got there. By evening, I reached the hilltop overlook where we'd camped what felt like a different lifetime. Same endless stretch of scrubland and dust. Same mountains on the horizon going soft in the sunset. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat a moment just listening to the RV tick as the metal cooled. Then I climbed out and lit a cigarette and watched the sun go under. The smoke rose into the cooling air the way it had at every hilltop I'd ever stood on watching something come to an end. 30 years in places where endings were violent and left nothing to recover. Somewhere in all of that, I'd learned to be still when things closed. To stay in the quiet that follows rather than run from it. Selena had learned surveillance from me. Pattern recognition, the patience to build a picture before moving the discipline to hold a cover story when it's under stress. She'd watched me for 43 years and absorbed every lesson I never sat down to give her, because I was never around long enough to teach her anything face to face. She got it all secondhand, through walls, through half-heard conversations, through the shape of my absence. She thought she'd absorbed everything there was. The one thing I'd never put into words, never even said plainly to myself until this week, was the principle that had kept me alive more reliably than any weapon or position I'd ever held. The best trap is the one the enemy walks into willingly. She thought she'd turned me into a courier, a human shield, an instrument that didn't know it was being used. She thought my love for Trent was the lever that would trigger the EMP, bring the federal forces down on Breck, clear her competition off the board. She believed she was the architect of the whole piece, and I was just the mechanism that made it run. But the chip had been sitting at the Pentagon for 2 days before she ever set foot in that quarry. Every call she'd made I'd heard. Every route she'd mapped Arlo had picked apart. Every lie she'd told in that canyon I'd cataloged and held up against what I was already assembling. She walked into that quarry, certain she controlled the stage, the cast, and the final scene. She didn't know she was walking into mine. I crushed the cigarette under my heel and let it go. The sun had dropped fully below the horizon, nothing left but a red smear along the desert's western rim. Somewhere inside a federal correctional institution, my daughter was wrapping up the first day of a sentence that wouldn't end until she was 83. Somewhere in Austin, a man I'd nearly let down was stepping into a life no longer pinned under the machinery that had been grinding him apart. Somewhere across 12 countries, 63 people were finding out what it means when the network holding you together goes dark all at once. And here I was, standing on a hill in West Texas, 68 years old, watching night pour itself over the desert floor. She thought she'd absorbed everything I had to teach. What she forgot was that the man who first showed her how to be patient was still breathing, still paying attention. I pulled myself back into the RV. The road west lay open ahead, swallowed whole by the dark headlights carving a thin channel through all that emptiness. I drove into it. For the first time in 6 days, I wasn't tallying anything. No scenarios running, no faces being read, no distances calculated, no threats tracked. Just a 68-year-old man moving through the desert at night, pointed toward home, toward a gun shop that would be sitting right where I'd left it come morning. That was enough. More than enough. That's where the road brought me. To darkness and desert and a gun shop waiting in the morning light, and a quiet that I hadn't felt in a very long time. I won't pretend it came without cost. You don't watch your own daughter engineer your death and walk away from that without carrying something. The grief doesn't disappear just because justice showed up. What it taught me, and I believe God had a hand in putting me exactly where I needed to be when I needed to be there, is that the truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes in a whispered phone call through a thin wall. Sometimes it arrives in a scratch pattern on a battery cover. You have to be still enough to hear it, patient enough to wait for it, disciplined enough not to move before it's time. So here is what I'd tell anyone listening. Trust the patience you've built over a lifetime. The instincts a man sharpens over decades don't go dull just because the years pile on. If someone works hard to make you feel like the threat, look closer. The loudest accusation in the room sometimes belongs to the one with the most to hide. Document everything. Not out of paranoia, out of respect for the truth. Paper and proof have a longer memory than loyalty does. And when the moment finally comes, and it will come, don't hesitate. You'll know. You've been preparing for it longer than you realized. If this story moved you, leave a thought in the comments. I read every one. Share it with someone who might need to hear it tonight. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Father's Silent Revenge and stay close. There are more stories where this one came from. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I mean that. You take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.